Bedtime Reading. Tales from Shakespeare. The Taming of the Shrew. Once in the city of Padua in Italy, there lived a rich gentleman named Baptista. He had 2 daughters named Katherina and Bianca. Everyone called Katherina the Shrew. A shrew is a sour, angry, mean young woman. Katherina was beautiful and very intelligent, but she was unkind, unpleasant, and usually angry with everyone. It seemed impossible that she would ever find a husband. However, her younger sister Bianca was beautiful, sweet, and gentle. Many men wanted to marry Bianca, but Baptista would not allow it. "When Katherina finds a husband, I will allow Bianca to marry. But not before," he said. One day a gentleman named Petruchio came to Padua. He wanted to find a wife. He heard the story of Baptista's 2 daughters. He decided that Katherina's terrible temper did not scare him. "She is beautiful and rich. I will tame her, as if she was a wild horse. I will marry her, and she will become as sweet and quiet as a mouse." Petruchio was very similar to Katherina. He was intelligent, lively, and independent, just like her. He was not afraid of Katherina. Instead, he was excited about taming this difficult woman. His personality was very fun-loving, and he thought that it would be fun to marry Katherina. So Petruchio went to the home of Baptista to ask his permission. "Sir, I have come from the city of Verona. I have heard stories of your gentle, sweet daughter, Katherina." Petruchio was lying, of course. "I would like your permission to spend time with her." Baptista wanted Katherina to be married, but he didn't want this nice-looking young man to be mistaken. "Sadly, Katherina is not sweet and kind," he said. Just then, Katherina's music teacher ran into the room. "Your daughter hit me over the head with her lute," he cried angrily. Petruchio thought this was very funny. "She is a brave young lady, isn't she? Now I want to talk to her more than ever." Then he said to Baptista, "Sir, I am in a big hurry. I cannot come here every day to see your daughter. My father, who is dead, has left me all his land. I must find a wife quickly. Now tell me, if Katherina agrees to marry me, what dowry will you give me with her?" A dowry was usually money or jewels that were given to a man along with a wife. Baptista thought that Petruchio was a little strange, but he wanted Katherina to be married. So he said, "I will give you 20,000 gold coins, and when I die, you will receive half my property." Petruchio agreed to this. Then Baptista went to find Katherina and tell her that someone had asked to marry her. While Baptista did this, Petruchio thought about what he would say to Katherina. "I will speak to her sweetly. When she shouts at me, I will tell her she is as sweet as a bird. If she frowns and looks angry, I will say she looks as beautiful as a young rose. If she is silent, I will praise her intelligence. If she tells me to leave her, I will act as happy as if she told me to stay for a week." Now the beautiful Katherina entered the room. "Good morning, Kate, for that is your name, I hear." Kate is a short name for Katherina.
"When people speak to me, they call me Katherina,"
said Katherina coldly. "No, you're lying. You are the prettiest Kate in the country. I have heard stories of your beauty and gentleness. So I have come to ask you to be my wife." Katherina, of course, was very unkind, loud, and angry. But Petruchio did not become angry himself. No matter what Katherina said, Petruchio said something nice to her in return. Their strange conversation continued for a while. Then Petruchio heard Baptista coming. "Sweet Katherina, we must stop talking of small things. Your father agreed that you will be my wife. Whether you want to or not, I will marry you." Then Baptista came in. Petruchio said, "Your daughter has spoken to me most kindly. She agrees that we will be married next Sunday." Katherina was furious, of course.
"I did not say that. I would rather see him killed on Sunday,"
she shouted. Then she scolded her father for wanting her to marry such a crazy man. But Petruchio whispered to Baptista, "Do not pay attention to her angry words. When we were alone, she was very sweet. I am sure she loves me and wants to be married." Then Petruchio said to Katherina, "Give me your hand, Kate. I will go to Venice to buy you beautiful clothes for our wedding. Baptista, you provide the feast and invite the guests. I will return on Sunday, sweet Katherina." On the Sunday, many people came to see the wedding. Everyone waited a long time, but Petruchio did not come. Katherina was so angry she cried. A little food and water had made Katherina feel better. She was really angry now.
"Sir Petruchio, I am going to speak whether you like it or not. I am not a child. You cannot tell me what to do. Many men, who are much greater than you, have listened to me speak my mind. If you cannot listen to me, you had better close your ears, because I will say what I like."
But Petruchio did not pay attention. He knew that the best way of managing Katherina the shrew was not to argue with her. She liked to argue too much. He just ignored her. "Why, you are right, sweet Katherina," he said. "This cap is too ugly. We will send it away."
"Love me or love me not, I don't care,"
shouted Katherina.
"I will have this hat or none."
"You said you wanted to see the dress?" asked Petruchio sweetly. He still pretended to misunderstand her. Then the dressmaker came in. He showed them a beautiful dress. Of course, Petruchio pretended not to like this as well. He did not want Katherina to have either piece of clothing. "What is this ugly thing?" he cried. "Do you call this a dress?"
"Sir, you asked me to make it in this way,"
said the dressmaker.
"I have never seen a more beautiful dress,"
said Katherina. She really wanted it. Petruchio just yelled at everyone to get out. Then he said to Katherina, "Come, my Kate, we will go to your father's house. Even if we are wearing poor clothes, we will go." Then Petruchio asked a servant to prepare 2 horses for him and Katherina. "We will reach Baptista's house by 7 o'clock, which is dinner time." Now, it was a long journey to Baptista's house. It was already 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Katherina knew they could not reach the house by 7 o'clock, but she was afraid to disagree with Petruchio. He was so loud and angry and strange. So she said very quietly,
"Sir, I am sorry to say, it is now 2 o'clock. We cannot reach my father's house before 7 o'clock."
Petruchio meant for Katherina to be extremely quiet, shy, and agreeable to him. In those days, a rich and noble woman was supposed to be this way. By the time they arrived at Baptista's house, Petruchio wanted Katherina to be totally changed. He knew that she was right about the time, but it did not matter. "Before we leave this house, it will be whatever time I want it to be," cried Petruchio, as if he were a god of the sun. "I will not go today. No matter what I say or do, you disagree with me and disobey me. When we go, it will be what time I say it is." So, for another day, Katherina had to practice a new way of acting. She had to be obedient. Petruchio would not let them leave until Katherina had totally submitted to him. The next morning they began their journey. Petruchio wanted to test his wife's obedience. "Look, Kate, look how the moon shines in the sky."
"But, sir, that is the sun,"
said Katherina shyly. Petruchio stopped his horse. "It will be the moon or the stars or whatever thing I say it is, before we go a step further." Katherina was no longer Katherina the shrew. Now she was Katherina, an obedient wife. She said,
"Sir, please let us go on. We have come so far. The sun shall be the moon, or the stars, or whatever you say it is. It will be the same for me."
Petruchio pointed to the sun. "So that is the moon, then," he said.
"Yes, I know. It is the moon,"
said Katherina patiently. "You are lying. That is the sun," said Petruchio.
"Then it is the sun,"
said Katherina.
"But it is not the sun if you say it isn't. What you want it to be, it is. It will be the same for Katherina, your wife."
So Petruchio allowed them to continue their journey. However, he wanted to see if this obedience would last. He decided to test Katherina once again. Soon they passed an old man riding a horse. Petruchio spoke to the old man as if he were a young woman. "Good morning, gentle young girl," he said. The old man looked amazed. "Kate, have you ever seen a more beautiful young girl? Look how red her cheeks are. Why don't you tell her how pretty she is?" Now Katherina was completely obedient. She agreed with whatever Petruchio said.
"Fair maid,"
she said to the old man,
"you are as pretty as a flower. Where are you going, and where is your home? Your parents must be happy to have such a pretty daughter."
The old man stared at the two people. Were they crazy? "Why, Kate," said Petruchio, "I hope you are not crazy. You say this is a young girl, but he is an old man."
"I am sorry, old gentleman,"
said Katherina.
"The sun was in my eyes, and you looked like a young maid. Now I see you are a wise old man. I hope you will forgive me."
The old man said, "Fair sir and lady, this strange meeting has amazed me. My name is Vincentio, and I am traveling to Padua. My son Lucentio is marrying a fair lady there. She is named Bianca." Now that Katherina had married, Baptista had agreed to let Bianca marry as well. "Sir, you are lucky. Your son is marrying a fine lady," said Petruchio. This made Vincentio very happy. The three of them had a pleasant journey to Baptista's house. There were many people there. They were celebrating the wedding of Lucentio and Bianca. When Petruchio and Katherina entered, Baptista welcomed them. Another man named Hortensio was there. He had also just got married. Lucentio and Hortensio had heard stories about Katherina the shrew. They laughed and made jokes about Petruchio's wife. "I'm afraid you got the worst woman," they said. These men were very pleased with their own wives, who were sweet, quiet, and ladylike. Petruchio did not pay attention. "Gentlemen, I will bet that my wife, Katherina, is more obedient than your wives." Baptista said, "Now let's be serious, my son. Katherina is a beautiful young lady, but she is the worst shrew in the world." "No, she isn't. I will prove that what I say is true." Lucentio and Hortensio, send servants to find your wives. Tell them to ask your wives to come to you immediately. I will do the same. The man whose wife comes first will win 100 gold coins." Lucentio and Hortensio agreed. They were sure that their gentle wives were more obedient than Katherina. Each man sent for his wife. First, Lucentio's servant returned. "I am sorry, Sir Lucentio. The Lady Bianca says she is busy and cannot come." Lucentio looked amazed. "What do you mean she is busy?" Petruchio laughed. "So, she is busy and will not come. Is that the answer of a good, obedient wife?" Then Hortensio's servant returned. But Hortensio's wife was not with him. "Sir Hortensio, your wife thinks you are playing a trick on her. She says you should come to her." Petruchio laughed again. "This is terrible." Then he spoke to his own servant. "Sir, go to your lady Katherina. Tell her I command her to come to me." The men didn't have any time to discuss whether or not Katherina would obey. In just a minute, Katherina came in. Baptista nearly fell out of his chair with surprise.
"What is your desire, sir?"
Katherina asked her husband. "Katherina, where is your sister Bianca and Hortensio's wife?"
"They are sitting by the fire,"
said Katherina. "Bring them here," said Petruchio. Katherina said nothing, but obeyed her husband. When she was gone, the men all started talking at once. "This is amazing! I wonder what it means," cried Lucentio. "It means peace," said Petruchio, "and love, and a quiet life. All things are in their right place, and everything will be sweet and happy." Baptista was very happy to see the change in his daughter. "My son, you have won this contest. I will add another 20,000 gold coins to Katherina's dowry. She is changed as if she were another daughter." "I will show you all something even better," said Petruchio. When Katherina came in, she had Bianca and Hortensio's wife with her. Petruchio continued, "See, here is she. She brings your disobedient wives with her. Katherina, that hat does not look good on you. Take it off." Katherina immediately took off the hat and threw it on the floor. The women, as well as the men, were amazed.
"What is this?"
cried Hortensio's wife.
"I will never have a reason to be upset until I am forced to do such a silly thing. What kind of duty is this? She is a fool,"
asked Bianca. "If Katherina is a fool, then I wish you were a fool too, fair Bianca. You always want new dresses and hats, and I hate them all. You should be more like your sister," said Lucentio. "Now, Katherina," said Petruchio, "I want you to tell these women how they should act. Tell them that they should obey their husbands." Katherina immediately gave a long speech about obeying one's husband. This lady, who used to be a shrew, now spoke happily about obedience, duty, and responsibility to her husband. It seemed that she had been this way all her life. So Katherina became famous in Padua. She was no longer known as Katherina the Shrew, but Katherina, the best and sweetest wife in Padua.
A Midsummer Night's Dream. In the ancient city of Athens, there was a very cruel law. This law said that fathers could make their daughters marry whom they chose. If a daughter refused to marry the man her father chose for her, then the father could have her killed. Of course, fathers do not often want their daughters to die. So this law was rarely followed by the Athenian people. However, there was one man named Aegeus who did want to obey the law. One day, Aegeus went to see Theseus, the Duke of Athens. Aegeus said that his daughter, Hermia, would not marry Demetrius, a young man from a good family. Hermia loved another Athenian man, named Lysander. Aegeus told Theseus that he wanted Hermia to die for her disobedience. As for Hermia, she felt there was a good reason why she couldn't marry Demetrius. Demetrius was in love with her good friend, Helena. Helena also loved Demetrius. But when Hermia explained this to her father, he did not care.
"I will give you 4 days to change your mind,"
Aegeus told Hermia.
"If you still refuse to marry Demetrius, you must die."
Hermia ran to her lover Lysander and told him everything. "I must marry Demetrius in 4 days or die," she cried. Lysander was very upset when he heard the terrible news. However, he soon thought up a plan.
"We must escape from Athens,"
he said.
"I have an aunt who lives far from the city. We can go to her. Outside of Athens, the terrible law doesn't exist. We can marry at my aunt's house."
Lysander told Hermia to meet him that night in a forest near the city.
"We have often walked with Helena there, in the lovely month of May,"
he said. Hermia happily agreed to this. She told no one about her plans but Helena. Unfortunately, the silly Helena decided to tell the whole story to Demetrius. Helena knew that when Demetrius discovered Hermia was gone, he would try to find her. She wanted to follow Demetrius into the forest. Now, this forest was a special one. It was the home of those strange creatures called fairies. The fairies' king and queen were named Oberon and Titania. Every night, Oberon and Titania would lead all the fairies in songs, drinking, and dancing. Sadly, at this time, the king and queen were very angry with each other. All the fairies were very upset. It seemed that Titania knew a little human boy, whose mother had been her friend. When the poor woman died, Titania stole the baby from its nurse and took it to live with her. Now Oberon wanted the little boy for a servant, but Titania would not give the child to him. It was the same night that Hermia and Lysander planned to meet in the woods. Titania was walking with some of her maidens in the woods. Suddenly, she met Oberon. He had all his servants with him.
"So it is you, proud Titania,"
said Oberon. "Jealous Oberon. Fairies, we are leaving. I am not speaking to him," said Titania angrily. She turned to leave.
"Stop! I am still your lord,"
said Oberon.
"Why do you treat me this way? Give me the child."
"Your whole fairy kingdom buys not the boy of me," said Titania coldly. She then left.
"Well, go then,"
said Oberon.
"Before morning comes, you'll be sorry."
He then called for Puck, who was his favorite servant. Puck was known for playing tricks on everyone. He was always ready to do what his master Oberon asked.
"Come here, Puck. I want you to find me the flower which is called love in idleness. It is a small purple flower. You put its juice on the eyes of a sleeping person. When they awake, they will fall in love with the first thing they see. Bring me the flower, and I will put its juice on my Queen Titania's eyes. The first thing she sees when she awakes will be an ugly monkey, or a lion, or an ape. She will fall in love with it, and I won't undo the magic until she gives me that little human boy."
Puck loved this idea and was very excited. He ran away to find the flower. While Puck was away, Oberon saw Demetrius and Helena enter the forest. The fairy king watched them in secret. Oberon saw that Demetrius was angry with Helena for following him. He said many unkind things to her, but Helena did not seem to care. She gently reminded Demetrius that he had once loved her.
"I'm leaving you here. I hope the wild animals eat you,"
cried Demetrius and ran away. But Helena just ran after him, as quickly as she could. Oberon was always friendly to lovers. He felt very sorry for Helena. When Puck returned with the purple flower, Oberon said,
"Puck, there is a sweet lady in trouble. She loves a man, but he does not love her. Take a few of these flowers into the forest. You will find the young man, Demetrius, sleeping on the ground. Drop some of the love juice into his eyes. Make sure that the girl is near him, so that the first thing he sees when he awakes is her. You will know the man by his clothes. He is from Athens." "Yes, of course, my king,"
said Puck proudly, and ran into the forest. Then Oberon took the rest of the flowers and went to find Titania. Titania was asleep in her usual place. It was beautiful and peaceful, and filled with flowers. All her fairies were away, doing their nighttime work. Oberon quietly walked up to Titania and dropped some of the magical juice on her eyes.
"What you see when you awake, do it for your true love take,"
he whispered. Meanwhile, Hermia and Lysander had met with each other in another part of the forest. They were traveling through the forest in the direction of Lysander's aunt's house. However, they soon became tired, so they lay down to sleep. Lysander slept a little distance away from Hermia. Here, Puck found them. He saw Lysander's Athenian clothes, and Hermia sleeping nearby. It is not surprising that Puck thought these two were Demetrius and Helena. Quickly, he dropped the love juice onto the closed eyes of Lysander. He flew away, saying,
"Won't my king Oberon be pleased with me?"
Then, some very strange things began to happen. In the middle of the night, Helena walked through the forest. She was looking for Demetrius, who had run away from her. She could not find him, and was feeling quite upset. Suddenly, she saw Lysander sleeping on the ground. "Lysander, if you are alive, then awake," she said. So when Lysander's eyes opened, Helena was the first person he saw. The magical love juice caused him to fall in love with her. He completely forgot about Hermia. Lysander stood up and told Helena that she was much more beautiful than Hermia. He told her he loved her deeply.
"I would run through fire for you, sweet lady,"
he cried. Helena was extremely angry. She thought Lysander was making fun of her. "Why are you pretending to love me? You are Hermia's lover," she said. But Lysander told her he didn't love Hermia, only her. Helena ran away, but Lysander followed her. When Hermia awoke, she was very frightened to see that she was alone. She walked around looking for Lysander. Meanwhile, Demetrius had also fallen asleep. He had not found Hermia or his enemy Lysander. Oberon the fairy king saw him sleeping. By this time, Oberon knew that Puck had given the love juice to the wrong man. Now Oberon put some love juice on Demetrius's eyes. And who was walking by when he awoke but Helena? Now both men were in love with Helena. Demetrius was about to speak to her when Lysander ran over. The unfortunate Hermia followed behind him. Both men began to speak words of love to Helena. Helena did not know what to think. She thought all of them were making fun of her. But Hermia was just as surprised as her friend. She did not know why Lysander and Demetrius, who had first loved her, now loved only Helena. Hermia didn't think it was very funny. Now the women, who had always been good friends, became angry with each other. "Unkind Hermia," said Helena, "why are you treating me this way? Before, Demetrius would not look at me, only you. He almost hated me. Now he calls me a goddess and a jewel. And Lysander is your lover. Why is he sitting at my feet? You told them to make fun of me. We have been friends for many years. How terrible that you would be so cruel." "I am amazed at your words," said Hermia. "I am not cruel to you. It seems that you are cruel to me." "Oh, I know you are all laughing at me when my back is turned," shouted Helena. While the women were arguing, the men had left them. They had gone to fight each other for the love of Helena. Soon, the women left to find the men. Oberon and Puck had been listening to these quarrels. When the 4 people left, Oberon said,
"Puck, look what you did." "Believe me, King,"
said Puck.
"it was a mistake. You did tell me I would know the man from his Athenian clothes. Well, both these men are from Athens. But I am not sorry this happened. I love to see them shout and cry. How funny!"
And Puck began to laugh. But Oberon said,
"Puck, I order you to find these people. Then you must fill the air with mist, so that they become separated from each other. Then make them think that they hear voices. After they have become tired from walking, they will lie down and sleep. When they are sleeping, drop the juice of this other flower on Lysander's eyes. When he awakes, he will love Hermia again. Each lady will have a lover. They will think everything was a terrible dream. Now I must go and see what my Queen Titania is doing."
Titania was still sleeping. Oberon wanted to find something silly for her to fall in love with. He soon saw a fat, silly-looking man sleeping nearby. He had become lost in the woods. Oberon placed a donkey's head on the sleeping man.
"There, now this man will be my queen's true love,"
he said. After a few minutes, the man woke up. He did not see Titania at first, but then she woke up and saw him. "Oh, what angel is this?" cried Titania. "Are you as wise as you are handsome?"
"Well, my lady,"
said the man, whose name was Bottom,
"if I can find my way out of this forest, then I think I'm wise enough."
"I do not want you to leave," cried Titania. "I am the Fairy Queen, and I love you. Come with me, and I will give you fairy servants." Bottom thought this was a very good idea. Titania then called 4 of her fairies. Their names were Peaseblossom, Cobweb, Moth, and Mustard Seed. "Take care of this gentleman," Titania ordered them. "Feed him with grapes and apricots and honey from the bees. Now sit with me, my beautiful donkey. Let me kiss your wonderful large ears." Bottom was not very interested in the queen, but he was very interested in the other fairies.
"Where is Peaseblossom?"
he asked. "Here, sir," said Peaseblossom.
"Scratch my head,"
said Bottom.
"Now, Cobweb, go and find me some honey. Mustard Seed, you can help Peaseblossom. I must go to a barber. I think my hair has grown."
"My sweet love," said Titania, "what would you like to eat? I can have a fairy go and find you some nuts."
"I would like some dried grass,"
said Bottom. Now that he had a donkey's head, he wanted donkey's food.
But first I will sleep for a while.
Oh, how I love you, said Titania. Sleep then, and I will hold you in my arms. Oberon thought this was very funny, but he pretended to be upset when he walked by. He scolded Titania for loving a donkey. Then he asked for the little human boy. Titania was very embarrassed that Oberon found her with her new lover. So she gave the boy to him immediately. Now that Oberon had gotten what he wanted, he decided to end the magic. He didn't want his queen to be in love with a donkey. He threw the juice of another flower into her eyes. Titania felt normal again. "What is this strange monster doing in my bed?" she asked. Oberon took the donkey's head off bottom. Oberon and Titania left him sleeping there peacefully. Now that the fairy king and queen were happy again, Oberon told Titania all about the adventures of the 4 lovers. She agreed to go with him to spy on the lovers once more. They found the 4 lovers asleep on the ground. Puck had managed to bring them all into the same place, to correct his mistake. Puck carefully removed the love juice from Lysander's eyes, with the juice of the other flower. Hermia woke up first. She looked at Lysander, wondering how he could be so strange and cruel to her. Soon, Lysander opened his eyes and saw Hermia. Now, of course, he loved Hermia again. Lysander and Hermia discussed the night's strange events. They doubted if it was real. Perhaps they had dreamed the same dream. Now Helena and Demetrius were awake also. Now that Helena had slept sweetly, she listened with delight to Demetrius's words of love. She was surprised and happy to see that his words were sincere. Hermia and Helena were now friends again, and all unkind words were forgotten. The 4 people talked about what they should do now. They agreed that Demetrius would tell Hermia's father that he wouldn't marry her. Then Aegeus would let Hermia live. However, just as Demetrius was preparing to return to Athens, they saw Aegeus. He had come into the forest looking for his daughter. Soon Aegeus learned that Demetrius would not now marry Hermia. He agreed that Lysander and Hermia could marry in 3 days. It would be the same day Hermia was supposed to die. Helena also agreed to marry Demetrius on this same day. Oberon and Titania were watching the happy people. They decided to celebrate the marriages of the lovers. On the day of the marriages, there would be songs and dances throughout the fairy kingdom. Now, some readers might be upset by this story of fairies and their tricks. They might think it is incredible and strange. But those readers can just imagine that they have been asleep and dreaming themselves. Perhaps they dreamed this whole story. But who could be upset by a dream of a pretty, harmless midsummer night? Much Ado About Nothing. In the kingdom of Messina, there were 2 ladies whose names were Hero and Beatrice. Hero was the daughter of Leonato, the governor of Messina, and Beatrice was his niece. Beatrice was a very intelligent, lively, and amusing person. Hero was very serious, and Beatrice liked to make her laugh. Beatrice found almost everything funny. At this time, some army men came to visit Leonato. These soldiers had just returned from a war. One of these men was Don Pedro, the Prince of Aragon. With them was his friend Claudio, who was a lord of Florence. There was also Benedick, lord of Padua. Benedick was very much like Beatrice. He was always telling jokes and laughing at things. These men had been to Messina before, and they already knew Leonato and the two women. Benedick immediately began a conversation with Leonato and Don Pedro, but Beatrice, who liked to speak in every conversation, interrupted them. She said, "I am surprised you are still talking, Master Benedick. No one listens to you." Benedick had met Beatrice before. He did not like her very much. He thought that girls like Beatrice should be quiet and sweet. It is always true that people who tease others never like to be teased themselves. Beatrice and Benedick were always insulting and making fun of each other. Benedick waited a moment before turning around and saying,
"Oh, my dear Lady Beatrice, are you still living?"
Then the two began to argue. Beatrice was very smart, and she knew how to make Benedick angry. Meanwhile, Beatrice's cousin Hero sat quietly nearby. Claudio watched Hero. He thought how beautiful she was. Don Pedro, the Prince of Aragon, watched Beatrice and Benedick. He thought their fighting was funny.
"Beatrice is a very fine, amusing young lady. She would make a good wife for Benedick,"
he said to Leonato.
"Oh no, my lord. If those two ever were married, they would kill each other,"
said Leonato. But the prince was not so sure. He wanted Beatrice and Benedick to be together. They were very similar. The prince soon discovered that his friend Claudio wanted to marry Hero. The prince thought this was a very good idea, as Claudio was a good and noble man. Leonato agreed to let Claudio marry his daughter. When the gentle Hero heard Claudio's words of love, she was extremely happy. The kind prince persuaded Leonato to let his friend and Hero marry as soon as possible. Claudio had to wait a little while before he and Hero could marry. He was very impatient and bored during this time. So, to entertain Claudio, the prince suggested something to pass the time.
"We should make Beatrice and Benedick fall in love,"
he said. Claudio thought this was an excellent idea. When Leonato and his daughter Hero heard the idea, they also wanted to help. "I would do anything to help my cousin find a husband," said Hero sweetly. The prince came up with this plan. The men would make Benedick believe that Beatrice loved him. Meanwhile, Hero would make Beatrice believe that Benedick loved her. The men began their plan first. They found Benedick quietly reading a book in the garden. The prince and his friends hid behind some trees nearby. They were careful not to let Benedick see them. However, he could certainly hear them. After some ordinary conversation, the prince said loudly,
"So, Leonato, didn't you tell me the other day that your niece, Beatrice, was in love with Benedick? I never thought that lady would love any man." "I didn't think so either, my lord,"
said Leonato.
"Isn't it amazing? She acts as if she doesn't like Benedick, but really she loves him dearly. My sweet Hero told me that Beatrice was so in love with Benedick that she would die of sadness if he didn't return her love,"
said Claudio.
"But sadly that's impossible. Benedick really doesn't like my niece. He thinks that good ladies shouldn't be so impolite,"
said Leonato. The prince pretended to feel sorry for Beatrice.
"We should tell Benedick immediately,"
he said.
"Why?"
asked Claudio.
"If Benedick hears about it, he'll only make fun of poor Beatrice." "Well, if he does that, then we should hang him,"
said the prince, pretending to be angry.
"Beatrice is an excellent lady. She is extremely wise in everything but her love for Benedick."
Then the prince whispered to his friends that they should leave. Benedick would want to think about what he had heard. Benedick had been listening to his friends with much interest. He was amazed.
Is it possible? Can that lady really love me?
He asked himself.
Yes, it must be true. They were very serious, and Hero told them it was true. She loves me. Well, I always thought I would die unmarried, but I never thought I'd live to find a wife. They say that Beatrice is wise and beautiful. She is wise in everything, but her love for me.
Then Benedick saw Beatrice walking towards him.
But here she comes. She does look like a lady in love,
he said. When Beatrice was near him, she said, Well, Sir Benedick, I didn't want to come here, but my uncle told me to find you and bring you to dinner.
Fair Beatrice, I thank you for your time,
said Benedick politely. After saying some more unkind things, Beatrice left him. However, Benedick thought that she seemed a little nicer to him than before.
If I do not take pity on her, I am a villain. If I do not love her, I am a Jew.
Now it was Hero's turn to talk to Beatrice. She had 2 other ladies, Ursula and Margaret, to help her. These were her servants. Hero said to Margaret, Good Margaret, go and find my cousin Beatrice. She is talking with the prince and Claudio. Tell her that you heard Ursula and I talking about her in the garden. This was the exact same place where Benedick had heard the men's conversation. After Margaret left, Hero and Ursula went into the garden. Hero said, Now, Ursula, when Beatrice comes, we must only talk about Benedick. Whenever I mention him, you must praise him. I will tell you about how Benedick is in love with Beatrice. Now, here comes Beatrice to listen to our talk. Ursula and Hero walked up and down and began their conversation. They pretended not to see Beatrice. Hero said, But Ursula, Beatrice is too unkind to Benedick. She thinks he is stupid. Are you sure, Lady Hero, that Benedick loves Beatrice so much? Asked Ursula. The prince says it is true. My lord Claudio also. They wanted me to tell Beatrice, but I told them I wouldn't. If they loved Benedick, they should never let Beatrice know the truth, said Hero. Oh, of course, said Ursula. Lady Beatrice shouldn't find out. She might laugh at poor Benedick. Truthfully, no matter how wise or handsome a man is, my cousin will dislike him, said Hero. It's not a very nice way to act, is it? Said Ursula. No, said Hero sadly, but if I told her, she would only laugh at me. Oh no, said Ursula. Beatrice cannot be as unkind as that. She couldn't refuse a fine man like Benedick. Benedick is the best man in Italy, except for my dear Claudio, said Hero. Now we should change the conversation, she whispered to Ursula. So tell me, Lady Hero, when are you going to be married? Ursula asked. Hero told Ursula that she and Claudio were getting married the next day. Come inside with me, Ursula. I must decide what I am going to wear, said Hero. After Hero and Ursula had gone, Beatrice was very excited. Can this be true? Benedick, do you love me? Then I regret my bad treatment of you. Love on. Now it must have been pleasant to see these enemies turned into lovers. It would be fun to see their first meeting, after being tricked into liking each other by their friends. But now we must hear about Hero. The next day was supposed to be her wedding day, but something terrible happened. The prince had a half-brother who had also come to Messina. This man was named Don John. He was an unhappy, angry, evil man. He hated his brother, Prince Don Pedro. Don John also hated Claudio, because he was the prince's friend. When Don John found out about Claudio and Hero's wedding plans, he decided to prevent them. He only wanted to make Claudio and the prince unhappy. It was the night before the wedding. Don John hired a man named Borachio to help him. He promised to pay Borachio a lot of money. At that time, this Borachio paid his court to Margaret, Hero's servant. Don John told Borachio to persuade Margaret to talk to him with Hero's clothing on late that night. Don John waited for a while, and then went to Claudio and the prince.
I am afraid I have some bad news,
he told them.
Claudio, I have seen your lady Hero talking to another man in the dark. She is a terrible girl. Come and see.
Claudio was upset.
If this is true, then I will never speak to Hero again. Yes, and I will tell the whole world what a terrible woman she is,
said the prince. When Don John, the prince, and Claudio went outside, they saw Borachio standing under Hero's window. Margaret, in Hero's clothing, was leaning out of the window, talking to him. So Claudio thought it was Hero herself.
Well, it is true,
said Claudio. Now, all his love for the innocent Hero had turned into hatred.
At the wedding tomorrow, I will tell everyone what I saw.
The next day, everyone met to celebrate the marriage. Hero and Claudio were standing in front of the priest. Suddenly, Claudio angrily told everyone what he had seen. Of course, Hero didn't know what he was talking about. Are you well, sir? She asked. Leonardo was very upset.
My lord, you must say something,
he cried to the prince.
What can I say?
Said the prince.
Leonardo, I promise you that I saw Hero talking to another man last night. So did Claudio and my brother Don John. Now I am sorry I wanted Claudio to marry Hero.
Benedict said in amazement.
This does not look like a wedding.
True. Oh, God! Cried Hero. Then she fainted. She looked dead. The prince and Claudio left the church. They didn't even stay to see if Hero was all right. They also didn't care about Leonardo's feelings. They were so angry. Benedict stayed to help Beatrice with Hero.
How is she?
He asked Beatrice. I think she's dead, cried Beatrice. She loved her cousin and didn't believe Don John's story. Unfortunately, poor Leonardo did.
I hope she is dead. My daughter has dishonored me,
he cried. However, there was one man who believed Hero was innocent. This was the church priest. He had seen Hero's reaction to Claudio's angry words. He knew Hero very well. And he said to Leonardo,
Sir, you must believe me. Your daughter is innocent. She could not do what these men said she did.
When Hero woke up, she said, Father, if you can prove that I spoke with another man, then torture me, hate me, but I promise you I'm innocent. The priest said,
I believe that the prince and Claudio have made a mistake.
Then he said to Leonardo,
Here is what you must do. Pretend that Hero is dead. You must prepare for a funeral and act very sad. Beatrice and Benedict, you must do the same. When Claudio hears of Hero's death, he will feel sorry for her. Then he will feel terrible that he accused her. Even if he thought Hero was guilty, he will still believe he caused her death.
Benedict now said,
Leonardo, I think the priest is right. Even though Claudio and the prince are my friends, I will not tell them the secret.
Leonardo agreed to this plan. The kind priest then took Leonardo and Hero away. Beatrice and Benedick were alone. Benedick was the first to speak.
Lady Beatrice, have you cried all this time?
He asked.
I believe that Hero is telling the truth.
Oh, I would love the man who could prove my cousin's innocence, cried Beatrice passionately. She was extremely angry. Benedick then said,
Is there any way I could help? For it is true that I love no one more than you, Beatrice. Isn't that strange?
It is just as strange as my saying I love you, said Beatrice. I will say nothing, but I'll deny nothing. Right now I am worried about my cousin.
So you love me and I love you,
said Benedick.
Come, I will do anything for you.
Kill Claudio, said Beatrice coldly.
Ha! I would never do that,
said Benedick. He loved his friend Claudio and believed that Claudio had somehow been tricked. How can you say that? Claudio has been terribly cruel to my innocent cousin. I thought he loved her, but he has dishonored her, cried Beatrice. Oh, I wish I were a man. I'd kill him this minute.
Listen to me, Beatrice,
cried Benedick. But Beatrice would not listen. She didn't want to hear any defense of Claudio. Sweet Hero has been lied about and dishonored. Oh, if only I were a man for Hero's sake, or if I had any friend who would be a man for my sake. But I cannot become a man, and I can't do anything. So I must die of grief.
Listen, Beatrice. Do you really feel that Claudio has wronged Hero?
Benedick asked seriously. Yes, I am sure of it, said Beatrice.
Then I will fight Claudio for you and Hero. Now I will kiss your hand and leave you. Go and be with your cousin,
said Benedick. While Beatrice and Benedick were having this conversation, Leonardo was talking to the prince and Claudio.
You must pay for what you did to my child. She has died of grief,
he shouted at them. Leonardo took out his sword to fight them. But the prince and Claudio respected the old man and said,
No, do not fight with us, good Leonardo. It is over.
But just then Benedick ran into the room. He challenged Claudio to a fight for Hero's honor.
Beatrice has asked him to do this,
thought Claudio and the prince. Claudio and Benedick would have fought each other. Certainly one man would have died. But just then, something wonderful happened. A servant of Leonardo's entered the room bringing a prisoner. It was Borachio. Borachio had been discovered talking about his and Don John's actions. Borachio told Leonardo, the prince, and Claudio the whole story. They learned that it was Margaret talking to Borachio, not Hero. If the three men had any doubt, they soon learned that Don John had run away from Messina. Claudio's heart was in pain when he learned the truth. He believed that Hero had died of grief after hearing his cruel words. His mind was filled with memories of Hero.
How do you feel?
The prince asked Claudio.
I feel as if I had taken poison,
cried Claudio. Then Claudio told Leonardo how sorry he was.
I will take any punishment you give me for dear Hero's sake,
he said.
All right. Tomorrow you will marry another cousin of Hero's. Now that Hero is dead, this lady will be my heir, and she is very much like Hero,
said Leonardo sternly. Claudio agreed.
I will marry this lady, even if she is a monster,
he said. Claudio spent that night lying in front of Hero's false grave. The next morning, the prince and Claudio went to the church. The priest, Leonato, and the mysterious niece were there. This lady wore a mask over her face. Claudio said to the lady in the mask,
"Give me your hand, lady. I am your husband if you will marry me."
"When I lived, I was your other wife," said the lady, and took off her mask. We can imagine Claudio's surprise when he found that this was Hero herself. Claudio could not believe his eyes. He cried out in joy.
"Is this Hero? Hero who died?"
The prince asked Leonato.
"She was dead, good prince, but only while the lies told about her were alive,"
said Leonato. The priest promised to explain the whole story to everyone after the wedding. But just then, Benedict interrupted.
"I want to marry Beatrice at the same time,"
he said. Beatrice was not so sure.
"You love me, don't you?"
Benedict challenged her. Then Beatrice and Benedict learned how they had been tricked into loving each other. But now, the love between them was real. Benedict still wanted to marry Beatrice. He said cheerfully,
"Well, Lady Beatrice, I suppose I will have to marry you. If I don't, my friends tell me you will die of grief."
Beatrice said something equally as amusing. And so these two lovers were also married, the same day as Claudio and Hero. As for Don John, the creator of all the problems, he was soon captured and brought back to Messina. It was a punishment for this terrible man to see the four lovers' joy and celebrations in the palace of Messina on that fine day.
Cymbeline. During the great old days of Rome, a king named Cymbeline ruled in Britain. Cymbeline's first wife had died when his 3 children were very young. He had 2 sons and a daughter. Imogen was his daughter. Sadly, the 2 young sons were stolen from their room when they were very small. Cymbeline never found out what happened to them or who took them, so Imogen was the only child in the house. After a while, Cymbeline married again. His second wife was a very bad woman. She hated her stepdaughter, Imogen. However, the new queen wanted Imogen to marry her son from her first marriage. The queen had also been married before. The queen hoped that when Cymbeline died, her own son, Cloten, would become king of Britain. If the king's sons were not found, then the Princess Imogen would become her father's heir. If Cloten married Imogen, then he would have the power. Unfortunately for the evil queen, Imogen married someone else without telling her father or the queen. She married a man named Posthumus Leonatus. This man was a great scholar and a fine gentleman. Posthumus's parents had both died when he was a young boy. Cymbeline felt sorry for the boy and raised him like a son. Imogen and Posthumus had the same teachers and played together often. They loved each other very much, and when they grew up they decided to marry in secret. The evil queen was very angry, of course. She had spies who were always watching Imogen. Immediately the queen told Cymbeline that Imogen had secretly married. When he heard the news, he was also angry. Imogen, who was a princess, was supposed to marry a prince. Cymbeline told Posthumus to leave the kingdom and never come back. "If you ever return to Britain, you will be killed," said the king. Imogen was, of course, terribly sad and upset. The queen pretended to feel sorry for Imogen. She offered to arrange a secret meeting between Imogen and Posthumus, who was going to Rome the next day. The queen was kind to Imogen for a reason. She hoped that when Posthumus had gone, she could persuade Imogen that her marriage was not real. After all, Cymbeline had not given his permission. Imogen and Posthumus were able to meet. Imogen gave her husband a diamond ring, which had been her dead mother's. Posthumus promised always to wear the ring. He gave Imogen a bracelet. He asked her to take good care of it and wear it always, to remember his love. Then they said goodbye. They promised to love each other forever. After her husband left, Imogen spent all her time alone. She was quiet and sad. Meanwhile, Posthumus arrived in Rome. In Rome, he made friends with many young men. These men were always talking about women. Each man thought that the women of his own country were the best. Posthumus, who loved Imogen, said that he thought his wife was the most beautiful, wise, and loyal lady in the world. One of these men, named Iachimo, thought that Roman women were the best. He didn't believe that Imogen could remain loyal to her husband. This made Posthumus very angry. Finally, after many arguments, Iachimo had an idea. He would go to Britain and try to make Imogen fall in love with him. Posthumus agreed to this plan. The men agreed that if Iachimo didn't succeed, he had to give Posthumus a lot of money. However, if Imogen did fall in love with Iachimo, then things would be different. Iachimo would persuade Imogen to give him Posthumus's bracelet. Then Posthumus would give Iachimo the diamond ring which Imogen had given him. Posthumus wasn't worried. He was sure that Imogen wouldn't fall in love with Iachimo. When Iachimo arrived in Britain, Imogen greeted him politely as a friend of her husband's. But when Iachimo began to speak words of love to her, she was angry. Iachimo soon realized that he would never win the bet with Posthumus. But now he really wanted to win the bet. So Iachimo came up with another idea. One night, he hid inside a large trunk in Imogen's bedroom until she came in and went to sleep. When she was asleep, Iachimo got out of the trunk and looked at the room very carefully. He wrote down everything that was in the room. Then he very carefully took the bracelet off Imogen's arm and left the room. The next day, Iachimo returned to Rome. When he arrived, he went to find Posthumus. "Look, Imogen loves me now. She gave me your bracelet. She even let me spend a night in her bedroom," he said. Then Iachimo described Imogen's bedroom exactly. At first, Posthumus didn't believe a word of the story. But then Iachimo took out the bracelet. "Do you remember this jewel?" he asked. "Imogen gave it to me. She said I loved it once, but no more." When Posthumus heard this, he was terribly sad, angry, and jealous. He said the most terrible things about Imogen. He gave the diamond ring to Iachimo and ran out of the room. Posthumus then wrote a letter to his friend Pisanio. Pisanio was a servant of Posthumus and was his good friend. In the letter, Posthumus said that he wanted Pisanio to take Imogen to a town called Milford Haven in the country of Wales. This town was by the seaside. When they reached Milford Haven, Pisanio was supposed to kill Imogen. At the same time, Posthumus also wrote a letter to Imogen. In this letter, Posthumus said that he wanted her to go with Pisanio. "I cannot live without you any more, dear wife. I will come to Milford Haven to meet you," he wrote. Imogen didn't know what had happened. She was extremely happy to receive her husband's letter. She loved Posthumus more than anyone in the world. She and Pisanio left for Wales immediately. Pisanio and Imogen had almost arrived at Milford Haven when Pisanio told the lady the truth. He did not want to kill Imogen, even though he was a friend of her husband's. Imogen was terribly upset, but Pisanio told her not to worry. "When he sees you, Posthumus will realize he made a mistake," said Pisanio. Pisanio told Imogen that she should dress herself in men's clothes for safety. Imogen agreed. She decided to go to Rome and find her husband disguised as a servant. Although Posthumus had treated Imogen terribly, she still loved him. Pisanio then had to leave Imogen and return to Britain. Before he left, he gave her a small bottle. "The queen wanted you to have this medicine, in case you became sick," he said. Now the queen hated Pisanio because he was these lovers' good friend. She gave Pisanio the bottle because she had thought it contained poison. Earlier, the queen had ordered her doctor to give her some poison. But the doctor knew the evil queen very well. He didn't trust her, so he gave her a sleeping drug instead. This drug made a person sleep so deeply that they would seem to be dead. But then they would awake after a few hours. The queen wanted to kill Imogen, so she told Pisanio that the bottle held medicine. After Pisanio left, Imogen walked for a long time. She wanted to find Milford Haven and get on a boat to Rome. But instead she found a cave where two young, handsome men lived. What Imogen did not know was that these men were really her missing brothers. These young men lived with a man named Belarius. It was Belarius who had stolen the boys when they were young. He had been a lord in Cymbeline's castle. A long time ago, Belarius had been falsely accused of treason to Cymbeline. Cymbeline told Belarius to leave Britain and never come back. To get revenge, Belarius had stolen the king's two sons. He took them far away where they lived in a cave in the forest. Although Belarius had taken the children in anger, he soon loved them as if they were his own sons. He taught them to read, write, and hunt in the forest. These two boys grew up and were happy, brave, and strong. They did not know they were princes, the sons of King Cymbeline. They believed that Belarius was their father. Imogen had been trying to find Milford Haven where she could take a boat to Rome, but instead she became lost in a great forest. When she found the boys' cave, she was weak and tired. Even if a young princess wears men's clothes, she is still a young lady. Imogen was not used to so much exercise. Imogen entered the cave, hoping to find someone inside. The cave was empty, but Imogen saw some cooked meat sitting on a stone. She was so hungry that she sat down and began to eat it.
"Oh, how tired I am! It seems that a man's life is a hard one. For 2 nights I have slept on the cold, hard ground. I thought the town by the ocean was nearby."
Then Imogen thought about her husband.
"Oh, Posthumus, how could you treat me this way?"
she said aloud. By this time, Imogen's 2 brothers and Belarius had returned home. Belarius had named the boys Polydore and Cadwal, but these were not their real names. Their real names were Guiderius and Arviragus. Belarius entered the cave first. He was surprised to see Imogen there. She wore men's clothes, so he thought she was a man. "Don't come in yet, my sons," he said. "There is a strange man here, who is eating our food." Imogen came forward and spoke to them.
"Good men, please do not hurt me. I am lost in the forest and was terribly hungry. I can pay you for this meat."
But the men would not take her money. "Where are you going, and who are you?" asked Belarius.
"My name is Fidel,"
said Imogen.
"I am trying to find the town of Milford Haven. I want to take a boat to Rome, but I am lost."
"Listen, my good man," said Belarius. "Do not think we are wild or stupid men because we live in a cave. Please stay with us tonight and eat and sleep here. You will feel better when you leave." Imogen's brothers welcomed her kindly. They wanted to roast a deer they had just killed. Imogen was very helpful in preparing this meal. Perhaps it was because these people were related. They all liked each other very much. The brothers wanted Imogen to stay with them. She happily agreed to stay for a while before continuing her journey. The venison they had taken was all eaten, and they were going out to hunt for more. However, Imogen could not go with them. She felt very tired and ill. When she was alone, she lay down and drank the liquid in the bottle. This was the sleeping drug, but Imogen thought it was medicine, of course. Soon Imogen fell into a deep sleep. It seemed that she was dead. When the men returned from their hunting, they were shocked to find that Fidel was dead. They were terribly sad. Belarius suggested that they bury their friend in the forest. Imogen's 2 brothers carried her outside and laid her in the grass. Then they sang funeral songs over her body. They covered her body with leaves and flowers. Then they left, very sad. Of course, Imogen was not dead. It wasn't long after this that she awoke. She found herself in the forest.
Was I dreaming? I thought I had met some kind young men and their father.
Imogen didn't see anyone around her. She decided everything had been a dream. Once again, Imogen began to walk, trying to find the town of Milford Haven. But great and terrible things were happening at this time. Imogen didn't know anything about them. A war had begun between the Roman Emperor Augustus Caesar and King Cymbeline. The Roman army had entered Britain. In fact, the Roman army and Imogen were in the same forest, and with the Roman army was Posthumus. Although Posthumus was now with the Roman army, he wanted to fight them. He wanted to join King Cymbeline's army because he was still loyal to Britain. At this time, Posthumus believed Imogen was dead. Pisanio had lied and written a letter saying that he had killed Imogen. Posthumus felt terrible that Imogen was dead, even though he had ordered her death. All Posthumus wanted to do now was die in battle. Before Imogen could reach the town of Milford Haven, she was captured by the Romans. The Roman soldiers decided to make Imogen a servant of Lucius, a great Roman general. Cymbeline's army entered the forest to fight the Romans. Imogen's lost brothers, Polydore and Cadwal, decided to join the British army. The 2 young men wanted to fight bravely. They didn't know they were fighting with their own father, the king. Belarius decided to go with the brothers and fight as well. He also wanted to defeat the Romans. Then there was a terrible battle. The British army might have lost and Cymbeline been killed, but fortunately Posthumus, Belarius, and the 2 young brothers rescued the king. The British were eventually able to defeat the Romans. After the battle was over, many people wanted to talk to King Cymbeline. Posthumus, who still hoped to die, remembered that the punishment for his return to Britain was death. He hoped Cymbeline would kill him. Meanwhile, Imogen and her master, the Roman general Lucius, were taken prisoners. They were taken to see King Cymbeline. Iachimo, Imogen and Posthumus's enemy, was also a prisoner. When these 3 prisoners were before the king, Posthumus came in. At the same time, Belarius, Polydore, and Cadwal also came to see the king. So it was a very strange situation. Although Cymbeline did not know it, his daughter and sons were standing there in front of him. Imogen stared at Posthumus, who was disguised as a poor man. She recognized him, but he did not know her. Imogen also recognized Iachimo. He wore the diamond ring she had given Posthumus on his finger.
Why does Iachimo have my ring?
She thought. Imogen did not yet know that Iachimo had caused all the trouble. The only person who recognized Imogen was her old servant Pisanio. He watched her from a corner of the room. "It is my Lady Imogen," he thought. "Who knows what will happen now, good or bad?" Belarius knew who she was, too. Or he thought he did. "Look, Cadwal, is that our friend Fidel?" Belarius said. "Yes, that young boy looks just like Fidel," said Cadwal. "No, it's impossible. If that were Fidel, then he would have spoken to us," said Belarius. Meanwhile, the Roman general Lucius spoke to the king.
I am a Roman, and will die bravely, but I want to ask you to do one thing.
He pointed to Imogen.
This young man is from Britain. Do not kill him. I have never had a servant who was so kind and excellent. Allow him to live. He has not harmed Britain, although he served a Roman.
Cymbeline looked closely at his daughter Imogen. He did not know who he was, but he felt that he was special.
All right, he said. I will let this young man live. He is very familiar to me. I don't know why.
Boy, you may live. You may ask me for whatever you want or need, and I will give it to you. Everyone was very interested to hear what Lucius's servant would ask for.
Lucius the Roman said, I will not beg for my life, my good boy. I know you will ask the king to save me, too.
No,
said Imogen sadly.
I cannot. I have something else to do, master. I cannot ask the king for your life.
This amazed the Roman general. Imogen then said,
King Cymbeline, I ask for this. Make that man, Iachimo, tell me where he got that ring on his finger.
Cymbeline agreed. Iachimo, tell this young boy what he wants to hear. Otherwise you will be tortured. Iachimo then told everyone the whole truth. He told everyone about his bet with Posthumus, and how he had tricked both Posthumus and Imogen. What Posthumus felt at hearing this story cannot be described. He instantly stepped forward and told Cymbeline that he had made Pisanio kill Imogen because he thought she loved Iachimo. Now he discovered that Imogen was innocent.
Oh, Imogen, he shouted, my life, my queen!
Now he wanted to die more than ever. Imogen hated to see Posthumus in this condition. She immediately took off her disguise. Posthumus was overjoyed to see his wife alive. Cymbeline, who was just as happy as Posthumus, forgave the two lovers for marrying against his desires. He was happy to have Posthumus as a son-in-law. Belarius chose this time to tell his old enemy Cymbeline the truth about his lost sons. He showed Polydore and Cadwal to the king. Here are your two lost sons, whose names were Guiderius and Arviragus. Cymbeline was so happy and amazed to see his sons that he forgave his old friend. For how could he be angry when his two sons and his daughter were all together again? Now Imogen asked her father to allow Lucius the Roman to live. Cymbeline agreed to do so. Lucius and Cymbeline created a treaty so that the kingdoms of Rome and Britain were peaceful for many years. As for Cymbeline's wicked wife, the queen, she soon grew sick and died. But that story should not appear here. It is enough to say that everyone who was truly good became happy.
The Tempest. A long time ago, there was a certain island in the ocean. The only people who lived on the island were a man named Prospero and his beautiful daughter Miranda. She had come to the island when she was a very small child. Since then, she had seen no other people. Miranda and Prospero lived in a cave. It was divided into a few different rooms. One of these rooms held Prospero's collection of magic books. At that time, every intelligent man studied magic. Living on the island, Prospero had found his knowledge of magic very useful. Before he had arrived, a witch named Sycorax had put a spell on the island. She died a short time before Prospero's arrival. Sycorax had imprisoned many good fairies, or spirits, in the trees. Prospero was able to release these spirits. These gentle creatures were obedient to Prospero from that time on. A spirit named Ariel was their leader. Ariel was not really a bad spirit. However, he loved to tease an ugly monster called Caliban, who lived on the island. Ariel did not like Caliban, because Caliban was the witch Sycorax's son. Fortunately for Caliban, Prospero met him in the forest one day. He kindly took Caliban home and taught him how to speak. Unfortunately, Caliban was very bad, like his mother. So Prospero made him into a servant, and Ariel had the job of watching the monster carefully. Ariel enjoyed this job. He could tease the monster as much as he wanted. Prospero ruled all the spirits on the island, so he was very powerful. He could command the weather and the oceans to do what he wanted. He could make the oceans rough or calm. One day, Prospero commanded the spirits to make a terrible storm on the ocean. Prospero called to Miranda and showed her a large ship in the distance. The ship was in danger of sinking. Prospero told Miranda that the ship was filled with people like themselves. Miranda was very upset. "Father," she said, "if your magic has caused this terrible storm, then please don't hurt the people. Look, the ship is almost sinking."
"Don't be surprised, my daughter,"
said Prospero.
"The people in the ship will be safe. I wanted to show you where you came from. Can you remember a time before you came to the island? You were only 3 years old when we arrived."
"I think so," said Miranda. "It almost seems like a dream. I think I remember 4 or 5 women who took care of me."
"That's right. Do you remember how we came here?"
asked Prospero. "I don't remember anything else," said Miranda.
"Miranda, 12 years ago we lived in Italy. I was the Duke of Milan. You were a princess and my only child. I had a younger brother named Antonio. I trusted him with everything, so I let him manage the city for me. I only wanted to study and improve my mind. However, Antonio became so powerful that he soon began to believe that he should be the Duke. He became very proud and dangerous. He and the King of Naples created a plan to get rid of me."
"But father, why didn't they kill us that very minute?" asked Miranda.
"They were afraid to,"
said Prospero.
"Instead, Antonio took us to a ship. When we were in deep water, he made you and I get into a little wooden boat. We had no food and no way to get to land. Antonio thought we would die there, but a kind friend of mine named Gonzalo had secretly helped us. Gonzalo hid some food, water, and my books on the boat when Antonio wasn't looking. We were able to survive until we landed on this island."
"Oh, father, how amazing! But why have you created this ocean storm?" Miranda asked. She looked at the ship in the water.
"Well, Miranda,"
said Prospero,
"I created this storm because my enemies, Antonio and the King of Naples, are on that ship. Now they're going to live on this island too."
Before Miranda could answer, Prospero touched her with the magic stick. She fell asleep immediately. Ariel was now standing before him. Miranda couldn't see any of her father's spirits, and Prospero didn't want her to see him talking to the empty air.
"Well, my brave Ariel, have you done what I asked you?"
said Prospero. Ariel talked for a long time about the terrible storm he had created for Prospero. He said that the King of Naples' son, Ferdinand, was the first person to jump into the sea. His father thought Ferdinand had drowned.
"But he didn't,"
said Ariel.
"He's on the island right now. He thinks the king is certainly dead." "That's my good Ariel,"
said Prospero.
"Bring Ferdinand to me. Miranda must meet this young prince. Where are the king and my brother Antonio? They're looking for Ferdinand. They think he drowned, though, so they don't have any hope. The truth is that every man on the ship is alive, but each one thinks he's the only one who was saved. I put a magic spell on the ship. It's safely sitting in the water, but they can't see it. Good, Ariel,
said Prospero.
But there's more work to do. Always remember this. Do what I ask, and someday I will set you free.
He then gave Ariel his orders. Ariel ran away to obey Prospero. First, he went to find Ferdinand. He was sitting on the grass, looking confused and sad.
"Oh, my young gentleman,"
said Ariel.
"the Lady Miranda wants to meet you. Come, sir, and follow me."
Then Ariel began to sing a strange song. The song told how the King of Naples had changed into a seaman and was living under the ocean. The king's bones were now coral, and his eyes were pearls. Sea women took care of him. Ferdinand believed this news about his father. Amazed, he followed Ariel to where Prospero and Miranda waited. Miranda had never seen a young man before. She watched Ferdinand as he walked towards them. "Oh, father," she cried, "is that a spirit? It is so beautiful."
"No, Miranda. That is a human being, just like us, and he is a prince of Naples. He was on the ship. He has lost his companions and is trying to find them,"
said Prospero. Miranda thought Ferdinand was very handsome. She had thought all men had gray hair, like her father. Ferdinand was amazed to see such a beautiful girl on this strange island. He asked Miranda if she was a goddess. Miranda said shyly that she was only a girl. Prospero was very pleased, for he saw that the two had fallen in love immediately. This was part of his plan. However, he wanted to test Ferdinand. He walked over to Ferdinand and said firmly,
"You're a spy. You've come to take my island away, haven't you? Come with me, I'll tie you up. You'll drink seawater and eat only shellfish and bitter nuts."
But Ferdinand was brave.
"No,"
he said.
"I'll wait until I find a better enemy."
He took out his sword to attack Prospero, but Prospero waved his magic stick. Suddenly, Ferdinand couldn't move. Miranda was upset. "Father, why are you so terrible to him? I think Ferdinand is a good man."
"Silence, Miranda,"
said Prospero.
"You are ridiculous. You think he's the best man in the world, but what do you know about men? Foolish girl, most men are much better than he is."
Prospero didn't really believe this. He only said it to test Miranda's love for Ferdinand. His daughter was true. She said firmly, "I have no wish to see another man, father." Prospero was pleased with his daughter.
"Come on, young man,"
said Prospero to Ferdinand.
"You're in my power now." "I suppose I am,"
said Ferdinand. Ferdinand didn't realize that Prospero had used magic on him. He only knew that he had to follow Prospero. As he and Prospero went into the cave, Ferdinand said to himself,
"I feel like I'm in a terrible dream, but everything would be all right if I could only see that beautiful girl again."
Prospero didn't keep Ferdinand in the cave for long. Soon he gave him a hard job to perform. He wanted to test Ferdinand's love for Miranda. Prospero made sure to let Miranda know about the hard work Ferdinand was doing. While Ferdinand was working, Prospero pretended to go and study. However, he was secretly watching both his daughter and the prince together. Ferdinand was piling up some heavy wood. Princes are not used to hard work, so Ferdinand soon grew tired. Soon, he was almost dead from tiredness. "Please, dear Prince," Miranda said, "don't work so hard. My father is busy studying now, so you can rest for now."
"My lady, I can't do that,"
said Ferdinand.
"I have to finish this work before I rest."
"Sit down, and I'll carry your wood for a while," said Miranda. But Ferdinand wouldn't agree to this. Instead of helping him, Miranda was making trouble. They started talking, which made Ferdinand work very slowly. Meanwhile, Prospero was watching the two. He was actually standing right next to them, but he was invisible to them. Ferdinand asked Miranda what her name was. Miranda told him and then said, "I shouldn't have told you my name. My father didn't want me to." Prospero smiled when he heard this. He had caused Ferdinand and Miranda to fall in love, so he was not angry that Miranda showed her love by forgetting her father's commands. Soon, Ferdinand spoke to Miranda of his love. He told her that he loved her more than any other woman. This also pleased Prospero. He smiled, thinking,
"Soon my daughter will be Queen of Naples."
Then Ferdinand told Miranda that he would be King of Naples one day. Then he asked her to marry him. "Oh, sir, I am a fool to cry when I am so happy," cried Miranda. "I am your wife, if you will marry me." Just then, Prospero appeared before the two lovers.
"Don't be afraid,"
he told them.
"I have heard everything and am very happy. Ferdinand, I have used you for my own purposes, but I will give you the gift of my daughter. I was only testing you. She is above all praise."
Prospero told the happy couple to sit and rest for a while he did other things. Prospero called Ariel to him. Ariel told him what he had done to Antonio and the King of Naples. He had left the two men very afraid. Ariel had made them see and hear strange things. When they were tired and hungry, Ariel caused a large table to appear. The table had many delicious dishes. But just as the two men were going to eat, Ariel turned into a terrible monster, and the food disappeared. The monster spoke to the men. He reminded them of their terrible treatment of Miranda and Prospero. Antonio and the king were immediately sorry. Ariel told Prospero that he felt sure the men's feelings were true.
"Well, bring them here, Ariel,"
said Prospero. Ariel soon returned with the King of Naples, Antonio, and Gonzalo, who had also been on the ship. Gonzalo had been Prospero's good friend. When they saw Prospero, Antonio begged his brother to forgive him for stealing his position as the Duke of Milan. The King of Naples also apologized for helping Antonio. Prospero forgave them, and they promised to make him the Duke of Milan once again. Then Prospero said to the king,
"I have a gift for you."
He showed the men to where Ferdinand and Miranda were sitting together happily. Clearly, they were very much in love. The king and Ferdinand were delighted to see each other alive. The king thought Miranda looked like a goddess and would make a beautiful queen for Ferdinand. As for Gonzalo, he wept with joy to see everyone happy and together again. Prospero now told everyone that their ship was safe and ready to go.
"But first,"
he said,
"eat and drink a little. I will tell you the history of my life since landing on this island."
Before he left the island, Prospero gave Ariel and the other spirits their freedom. Ariel was very happy. He had always wanted to be free, although Prospero was a good master.
"Thank you, dear master. Let me go with your ship and protect it. But then, when I am free, how happily I will live."
He would wander through the forests and fields, and fly wherever he chose. Prospero buried all his magic books in the ground. He would not need them now that he had no enemies. Nothing stood in the way of his happiness. He would return to Milan and become the Duke once again. The King of Naples said that Ferdinand and Miranda must be married immediately upon their return. They all sailed for Italy, with the happy spirit Ariel protecting their ship upon its way.
Romeo and Juliet. In the city of Verona there were two very rich, powerful families. These were the Capulet family and the Montague family. Many years ago, these families had a terrible quarrel. In the coming years, this quarrel got worse and worse. These families hated each other deeply. Even the servants of each family hated each other. The Montagues and the Capulets could not meet each other in the street without speaking angry words. Often they would fight each other with swords. One evening, the great Lord Capulet had a large party. Many fair and rich ladies and gentlemen came. Everyone was welcome, as long as they were not from the Montague family. However, one young man from the Montague family was at the party. His name was Romeo, and he was the son of the respected Lord Montague. At first Romeo hadn't wanted to come, but his friend Benvolio persuaded him. Romeo was in love with a girl named Rosaline, who was at the party. Unfortunately, Rosaline did not love Romeo. Often it is this way with men and women. "Romeo, come to the Capulets' party in disguise. No one will know you," Benvolio had said. "I will show you the most beautiful girls in Verona. Then you will forget about Rosaline." Romeo didn't believe Benvolio, but he wanted to go to the party anyway to see Rosaline. Romeo was a good and true lover. He loved deeply. Often he would stay up all night thinking of Rosaline. But Rosaline never paid attention to him. Romeo, Benvolio, and their friend Mercutio arrived at the party. Romeo was in disguise, so the Lord Capulet did not know him. He welcomed the three friends to the party. That night, Lord Capulet was light-hearted and merry. "I once wore a mask too when I was young," he said to Romeo. "I would whisper stories in young ladies' ears." The three friends ate, drank, and danced. While they were dancing, Romeo saw a girl he had never seen before. He looked at her, and then looked again. Soon he could not stop staring at her. She was the most beautiful, wonderful-looking girl he'd ever seen. "She could teach the lights how to shine brightly," he said. "She shines like the richest jewels worn by Arab men. Her beauty is too much for this earth. No other lady in this room can compare to her." When Romeo spoke these words, he was heard by a man named Tybalt. Tybalt was Lord Capulet's nephew. Tybalt, who was a loud and angry young man, recognized Romeo's voice. "It is Romeo Montague," he shouted. "He is here in disguise. He has come to laugh at our celebrations." But the Lord Capulet would not allow Tybalt to hurt Romeo during the party. "He has behaved like a gentleman," Lord Capulet said. "All people in Verona speak well of him. Leave him alone for now, Tybalt." Tybalt was very angry at being told to wait. He would make Romeo pay some day. When the dancing was done, Romeo looked for the mysterious young lady. When he found her, he went over and took her hand. "Your hand is like a temple which no one should touch," he said to the young lady. "But I have touched it, so I will kiss it in punishment."
"Good sir, your words are too kind. The saints have hands which people can touch, but they cannot kiss them,"
said the lady. "Saints have lips too, don't they?" asked Romeo, staring at the lady.
"Yes, lips which they must use for prayer."
said the lady. They continued to talk for a little longer. Romeo continued to speak words of love to the lady, and she responded. It was clear that they were deeply attracted to each other. Suddenly the lady said,
I hear my mother calling to me. I must go.
Who is your mother? Asked Romeo. It was then that Romeo discovered that this young lady was Juliet, daughter of the Lord and Lady Capulet. These families had sworn to be enemies forever, but Romeo had just fallen in love with one of these enemies. It was a terrible situation, but Romeo could not stop thinking about Juliet. Juliet was just as troubled when she discovered that Romeo was a Montague. She felt the same way about Romeo. Her feelings were quick and wild.
How strange it is that I should love the one man my family has told me to hate,
she said. Now it was midnight, and so Romeo left with his friends. However, he soon decided to return to Juliet's house alone. He needed to see her again. Romeo ran back to Juliet's house and jumped over a garden wall. He didn't know it, but this garden was right below Juliet's room. Romeo walked around the garden for a while, thinking about his love. Suddenly he saw Juliet. She was standing on a balcony, staring at the moon. Romeo hid in the shadows of the garden and watched her. Juliet is so much more beautiful than the moon, whispered Romeo. Her beauty shines as brightly as the sun. Romeo watched Juliet put her hand on her cheek. I wish I were a glove on that sweet hand, he said. Juliet did not see or hear her lover. She looked troubled.
Oh my,
she sighed. Speak again, bright angel, whispered Romeo. His eyes shone brightly.
Oh, Romeo, Romeo, where are you, Romeo?
Said Juliet sadly.
Deny your father and the name of Montague. Do this for me. Or, if you will not do these things, then be my promised lover, and I will no longer be a Capulet.
Romeo almost cried out, but he wanted to hear more of these sweet words. Still thinking that she was alone, Juliet continued to talk to herself. She wished Romeo came from some other family. He should give up the Montague name.
This name is not part of you. It means nothing. If you give it up, you will have all of me,
cried Juliet. Romeo now spoke. Then call me love, or whatever you like, he said. I am no longer Romeo, a Montague, if that name makes you sad. At first Juliet was frightened to hear a man's voice in her garden. She thought some other man had entered the garden and discovered her secret love, but she soon realized it was Romeo. She was very concerned, telling him he should be careful. They might be discovered by her parents or a servant. If Romeo was found, they would kill him because he was a Montague. No, said Romeo. There is more danger in your eyes than 20 of their swords. If you only look kindly at me, then I am protected. It is better if my life were ended by their hatred, than that I should live, and live without your love.
How did you come here?
Asked Juliet. Love showed me the way, said Romeo. I am not a pilot, but even if you were 1,000 miles away, I would find you. These words made Juliet's face turn red. She felt extremely happy. She felt a little unsure because she had not meant for Romeo to know about her love. During these times, it was the custom for ladies to be a little cruel to their lovers at first. Ladies had to pretend not to care about these men, and say mean things to them, even when they loved them. The difficulty of winning a lady makes her more valuable to a man. Juliet could not pretend that she didn't love Romeo. He had heard the words from her mouth.
There, Romeo. Do not think that because I loved you so soon after we met, I am not worthy,
she said.
I am more honest than other women, and my love is more true."
Romeo said that he could never think badly of Juliet. He wanted to climb up the wall and see her, but Juliet thought this was a dangerous idea. Romeo wanted to exchange a vow of love and marriage to Juliet.
"You already heard my words of love before,"
said Juliet.
"but I will say them again. My love for you is as deep as the ocean. But not now. I hear my nurse calling. It is late, and I must go to sleep."
Juliet left for a minute, but soon came running back.
"If your words are honorable, and you want to marry me, then leave now. Tomorrow, I will send a messenger to you. You can decide the time for the marriage. After we are married, I will follow you anywhere in the world, for you will be my lord."
When the two lovers were talking, Juliet's nurse kept calling her. Juliet didn't want to leave Romeo, and Romeo didn't want to leave her either. The sweetest music for lovers is the sound of each other's voices. When they finally left each other, Romeo was too excited to sleep. Instead of going home, he went to the house of a priest he knew. This kind old priest was named Friar Lawrence, and he was like a father to young Romeo. When Friar Lawrence saw Romeo, he knew something had happened. "You have not slept," said the friar. "You look as if love has kept you awake. Have you been thinking about Rosaline?" "Oh no," cried Romeo. "I never really loved Rosaline. I now have a true love, the only love of my life. You must help us to marry." Romeo then told Friar Lawrence about Juliet. The friar was amazed at Romeo's change of heart. At first the friar didn't believe that Romeo's feelings were real. "You remember how you loved Rosaline. You young men are always changing your minds about women," he scolded. But Romeo said, "Friar, you scolded me for loving Rosaline. You said she would never love me in return. Now I love Juliet, who loves me back. Isn't this better?" After some time, the friar agreed to marry Romeo and Juliet. He believed that a marriage between these two families might be a good thing. It might stop their anger at and hatred of each other. Romeo felt very lucky. He told Juliet's messenger everything that had happened. "Tell my lady to meet me at Friar Lawrence's home early tomorrow morning." The next morning, Romeo and Juliet were married. After this joyful event, Juliet had to go home. She was very impatient for night-time, when she and Romeo would meet in the garden. The hours seemed to last forever. That same day, Romeo's friends Benvolio and Mercutio were walking around the town of Verona. They soon met a group of Capulet men. Juliet's cousin, the angry Tybalt, was with them. When Tybalt saw Mercutio, he shouted, "You, Mercutio! You are a friend of the horrible Romeo, the Montague!" Mercutio was just as brave and bold as Tybalt. He became angry at hearing his friend Romeo spoken of in this way. Benvolio tried to calm the men down, but they began to shout and quarrel with each other. Everyone took out their swords. It seemed that a fight was about to begin when Romeo walked by. Tybalt immediately forgot about Mercutio. "It is the villain Romeo! The criminal Romeo!" he yelled. Romeo did not want to fight with Tybalt. Romeo was a very intelligent and gentle young man. He knew that fighting wouldn't solve anything. Besides, he did not hate the Capulet family. How could he, when his lady, Juliet, was a Capulet? Juliet liked her cousin very much, so Romeo didn't want to quarrel with him. Romeo spoke calmly to Tybalt, whom he called Good Capulet. But Tybalt hated all Montagues, like he hated hell and the devil. He wouldn't listen to Romeo. Tybalt wielded his sword and tried to attack Romeo, but Mercutio jumped between them and fought with Tybalt instead. Sadly, Tybalt killed Mercutio. Now Romeo was extremely angry and forgot all his kind feelings. Tybalt had killed one of his best friends. Romeo attacked Tybalt, and the two men fought for a long time. Hatred was in their eyes. Romeo was able to kill Tybalt in revenge. Now both Mercutio and Tybalt lay dead in the street. All this fighting occurred during the day. Soon a large crowd was standing around the young men. In this crowd were the lords Capulet and Montague with their wives. Soon after, the Prince of Verona came. He was related to Mercutio. The prince was very tired of these fights between the Capulets and Montagues. They ruined the peace and quiet of his city. So he was very firm about punishing the young men. "Benvolio, you saw all the fighting. Tell us all what happened," the prince commanded Benvolio. Benvolio told the whole story. Lady Capulet was very upset at Tybalt's death. She asked the prince to punish Romeo as badly as possible. This lady did not know that Romeo was her daughter Juliet's husband, of course. Lady Montague begged for her son's life. She said that Romeo had done nothing wrong in killing Tybalt.
This Tybalt was already a prisoner of the law, because he killed Mercutio,
she said. The prince did not pay attention to these women. He thought for a little while and then said, "I have decided. This Romeo can never enter Verona again." When Juliet heard what had happened, she was terribly upset, frightened, and extremely angry. She was angry that Romeo had killed her cousin, and now she couldn't see him anymore, and they had just been married. At first Juliet could not decide between her love and her anger. She did not know whether to hate Romeo or love him. But soon love won, and Juliet cried tears of joy and sadness.
"I am so glad that Romeo lives, when Tybalt might have killed him. But when will I see him again?"
Meanwhile, Romeo had gone to Friar Lawrence's house to hide. For Romeo, the prince's punishment was more terrible than death. How would he see Juliet? To Romeo, there was no world outside of Verona, no life without Juliet. Heaven was where Juliet was. Hell was everywhere else. Romeo shouted and tore his hair. He talked about killing himself. Fortunately, however, Romeo's shouting stopped when a messenger brought him a letter from Juliet. The good Friar Lawrence took this opportunity to urge Romeo. "You have killed Tybalt. Now you want to kill yourself, too? How selfish and ridiculous! You are alive, and Juliet is alive, too. She has become your dear lady. How can you think of dying? What would happen to her? Be courageous like a man should be. You should be thinking about your and Juliet's future." When Romeo was a little calmer, Friar Lawrence made a plan. He said that Romeo should go to the town of Mantua and hide for a while. The friar would stay in Verona and speak to the lovers' families. He would tell them the truth. "Perhaps when the lords learn of this marriage, they will end their quarrel," he said. "Go to Juliet tonight. Tomorrow go to Mantua and wait for my message." That night, Romeo went to find Juliet in secret. They spent the night together in Juliet's bedroom. They were very happy, but also sad. The next day they would separate. They did not know when they'd see each other again. The morning arrived too soon. Romeo said goodbye to Juliet with a sad heart. He promised to write her letters every day. He climbed down the wall and stood staring up at Juliet. Juliet's mind was very afraid.
"I am afraid. To my eyes, you look like one who has died,"
she cried. Romeo also felt afraid. If anyone saw him, he would be in serious trouble. He quickly left. This was only the beginning of the lovers' terrible tragedy. Romeo had only been gone from Verona for a few days, when the trouble began. Juliet's father decided that Juliet should marry a man named Paris. Her father did not know that his young daughter was already married. Paris was a young, noble, and handsome man. Juliet might have liked him very much if she had never met Romeo, but now she could love no one else. Juliet was very afraid. She tried to persuade Lord Capulet that she was too young to marry. She said that her cousin Tybalt's death had made her sad and ill. She couldn't marry anyone now. It would be terrible for the Capulets to celebrate a marriage so soon after Tybalt's death. Juliet gave her father every reason why she couldn't marry Paris, but the true one. But Lord Capulet would not listen. "You will marry Paris on Thursday, which is in 2 days," he said firmly. He ordered Juliet to get ready for the wedding. Juliet didn't know what to do. She decided to go and talk to Friar Lawrence. Perhaps he could help her make a plan. After they had talked a while about the terrible situation, Friar Lawrence had an idea. "Lady Juliet, I think I can help you, but this plan is very strange. You must have courage."
I would die rather than marry Paris. My own Romeo is waiting for me. I am not afraid,
said Juliet. "Then here is what you must do. Go home and pretend to be happy. Tell your father you will marry Paris. Tomorrow night is the night before your marriage to Paris. You must drink this bottle of medicine which I am giving you. When you drink this medicine, you will fall asleep for almost 2 days. You will appear cold and dead. When they find you on Thursday morning, they will think you are dead. Then your family will take you to be buried in the family tombs. Now, Lady Juliet, if you will do this, and not be afraid, then when you wake up, Romeo will be with you. I will tell Romeo of our plan. Romeo will come to the family tomb in the night. When you wake up, he will take you to Mantua." Juliet agreed to this plan. The friar gave her the medicine. When Juliet left the friar's house, she met with Paris. She agreed to marry him in 2 days. This news made Lord and Lady Capulet very happy. Everyone was busy getting ready for the wedding. There would be feasting, dancing, and music. On Wednesday night, Juliet took out the bottle. She felt a little afraid. What if the friar had given her poison? What if she woke up before Romeo came? Then she would be alone in the dark, cold tomb of the Capulet family. She would be surrounded by dead Capulets. Bloody Tybalt would be there. But her love for Romeo gave her courage. Juliet drank the liquid, and the next morning, when Paris came to find her, she appeared to be dead. Paris was of course very upset, but his feelings were little compared to Juliet's parents. Juliet was their only child. Now, instead of a wedding, they were having a funeral. Meanwhile, the friar had written a letter to Romeo which said, "When you hear of Juliet's death, do not be sad. She is living. I have given her some sleeping medicine. The funeral is not real. Your lady will lay in the tomb for only a short time. You must go to her and take her to Mantua." Unfortunately, bad news always travels faster than good. Romeo heard that his Juliet had died before the friar's letter reached him. Romeo immediately prepared to return to Verona with one of his servants. He wanted to see his wife in her tomb. Romeo was so unhappy he wanted to die. On the way to Verona, he stopped at a medicine shop and bought some poison. He decided to kill himself, so he and Juliet would be together. So Romeo returned to Verona to see the dead Juliet, or so he thought. After I have kissed her cold lips, I will die too, he thought. Then we will be buried together. At midnight, Romeo arrived at the church of Verona. There were many tombs surrounding it. The largest was the Capulet's tomb. Romeo had a light with him and a spade, and wrenching iron. He would use the tool to open the door of the tomb. As Romeo was doing this, he was interrupted by a shout. "Horrible Montague!" someone cried. This was the young man, Paris. He had come to Juliet's tomb to put flowers on her grave. He saw Romeo and knew he was a Montague. Paris did not know why Romeo was there. He only knew that Romeo was the enemy of the Capulet family. "Have you come here to disturb this lady's body, you criminal?" said Paris angrily. "Go away, I warn you. I killed Tybalt, and I will kill you too," said Romeo coldly. Paris attacked Romeo, but Romeo was a good fighter. He killed Paris quickly and easily. Then he broke into Juliet's tomb. There she lay. She looked fresh and beautiful. Death has no power over her. Her cheeks are as pink as roses, Romeo whispered. Next to Juliet's body lay the dead Tybalt. Romeo now felt sorry for Tybalt's death. "Cousin Tybalt, do not be angry. I am about to do you good by killing your enemy, myself," said Romeo. Then Romeo kissed Juliet's cold lips and drank the poison he had bought. A minute later, he was dead. He never knew that Juliet was alive. The good priest, Friar Lawrence, learned that his letter hadn't reached Romeo. He came to the tomb to find Juliet. The friar saw a light burning in the Capulet's tomb. Then he saw the open door, and then the bodies of Romeo and Paris. Before the friar had time to think, Juliet woke up. She saw the friar standing there. Then she realized where she was and why she was there.
"Where is Romeo?"
she asked the friar. But the friar only said, "Lady Juliet, you must come out of there. Something terrible has happened." But before he could explain, the friar heard a noise. Someone was coming. Very afraid, he ran away. Now Juliet saw Romeo lying dead on the ground. The cup of poison was in his hands. She quickly guessed that he had killed himself.
"I would drink this poison too, if there was any left,"
she said.
"I will kiss your lips. Perhaps there is some poison there,"
she said to Romeo. Then Juliet saw Romeo's knife. Quickly she grabbed the knife and pushed it into her chest. She died by her lover Romeo's side. Then many people came running. Someone had seen Paris and Romeo fighting, and gone to find some soldiers. Soon everyone in the town of Verona knew something was happening at the Capulet's tomb.
"Who is dead? Who is alive? Paris? Romeo? Juliet?"
everyone said. Soon all the noises woke up the Lord Capulet and the Lord Montague. When these two reached the graveyard, they saw a terrible sight. Romeo and Juliet lay next to each other, both dead. Then the friar who had returned told Lord Capulet and Lord Montague the whole sad story. He told them how Romeo and Juliet had met, fallen in love, and secretly married. "I was glad for this marriage. I was going to tell you about it, hoping that your quarrel would end," said the friar sadly. "But before I could do so, Lord Capulet tried to make Juliet marry Paris. So Juliet and I created a plan where Romeo would find her and take her to Mantua. But the plan failed. My letter to Romeo was late. I do not know why. Now they are both really and truly dead. As for Paris, I do not know why he also is here," he said sadly. One of Paris's servants then came forward. He explained that Romeo and Paris had fought, and Romeo had killed Paris. Then a servant of Romeo's explained that Romeo had written his parents a letter. The letter was only to be delivered if Romeo died. Romeo had written that he was sorry to cause his parents pain, but his love, Juliet, had died, so he wanted to die too. Fortunately for the Friar Lawrence, the Capulets and Montagues decided that he was not to blame for these sad deaths. Meanwhile, the Prince of Verona had arrived.
"Lord Capulet and Lord Montague, do you see what has happened now because of your quarrel? Both your children are dead. Dead because of love. God has punished you for your hatred, using the love of your children for each other." These two lords agreed to end the long hatred between their families. "We will be like brothers from now on," they said sadly. Lord Montague said, "Brother Capulet, I will build a statue of your true and loyal daughter, Juliet. No lady will be more respected than she." "I also will build a statue. It will be a statue of your son Romeo. He loved my daughter so much that he died, rather than live without Juliet," said Lord Capulet sadly. So these two poor old men became friends again. The town of Verona was peaceful once again, but the price that these families paid for peace and friendship, the lives of their children, was too terrible. The lords could only hope that these lovers were together in heaven.
Othello. Brabantio was a rich man in Venice who worked for the government. He had a beautiful, gentle daughter named Desdemona. Many men wanted to marry Desdemona, but she said no to all of them. Desdemona was not like other women. She was looking for a truly special man. She believed that the powers of the mind were more important than looks or status. Still, people were shocked when Desdemona chose a man named Othello to be her lover. Othello was a black man from a race of people called Moors. Moors came from North Africa. At this time in Europe, white and black people did not marry. It was not done. Still, Othello was a very good choice, even though he was black. He was a brave soldier in the Venetian army. At this time, Venice was at war with Turkey. Othello had fought the Turks bravely and won many honors. He was respected and liked by all who knew him, especially Desdemona's father. Othello was a great traveler. Desdemona, like many ladies, loved to listen to adventure stories. She loved to listen to Othello's stories, and he enjoyed talking to such an intelligent young lady. Othello told Desdemona about the dangerous adventures he'd had at sea. He told her about when the Turkish enemy captured him, and how he escaped. Desdemona especially liked to hear Othello's stories of far-off countries. He told her of green jungles and tall mountains, and deep caves which never ended. There were cannibals, people who ate men. There were also the people with heads below their shoulders. Desdemona enjoyed all this greatly. One day, when Othello's stories were done, Desdemona said, "My lord, it is all so strange. I wish that heaven would give me a man like you." Her pretty face turned pink with embarrassment. "If you know anyone who loves me, sir, all that man would need to do would be to tell me stories like yours, and I would give him my heart." What Desdemona meant was that she loved Othello and wanted him to love her too. Women could not speak words of love openly in those days, but Othello understood her meaning. He was very happy, as he also loved Desdemona. He told her so and asked her to marry him. She said yes. Unfortunately, it would be difficult for Othello and Desdemona to marry. Brabantio would not like his only daughter to marry a black man, even if Othello was Venice's greatest soldier. So Othello and Desdemona were married in secret. Of course, when Brabantio heard of it, he was extremely surprised and angry. Brabantio called a great meeting of government people together to discuss this shocking marriage. Othello and Desdemona were also there. At first, Brabantio shouted at Othello,
"You are a Moor. You have used magic to make my daughter love you. How else would the fair Desdemona agree to marry a black man against all customs?"
But Othello remained calm. He told Brabantio and the other men how he and Desdemona had fallen in love. He told them about Desdemona's love of a good story. Soon, the men realized that Othello was being clear and honest. He had won Desdemona's love naturally.
"Stories like yours would have impressed my daughter too,"
said the Duke of Venice to Othello. Then Desdemona came forward and spoke to everyone. "I have a duty to my father, but even more important, I have a duty to my lord and husband," she said. "Father, didn't my dear mother act the same way? She chose you over her own father." Brabantio then regretted his harsh words.
"Othello, my daughter is yours,"
he said.
"If I could have stopped her from marrying you, I would have. But what is done can't be undone. I am very glad I have no other daughter, or else Desdemona's actions make me want to lock her up in her room forever."
At this time, the city of Venice needed Othello's help. The Turkish enemy had attacked the island of Cyprus. At this time, Cyprus belonged to Venice. Everyone agreed that only Othello could defend the island from the enemy. After the problem of his marriage was solved, Othello agreed to go to Cyprus. He would lead an army against the Turks. Desdemona was a little afraid of the danger, but she wanted to go with him. On the day they arrived in Cyprus, some happy news came. The Turkish ships had been caught in a storm, so the island was safe for a short time. But the war that Othello had to suffer had only begun. Another enemy was nearby, and this enemy was more deadly and terrible than 1,000 Turkish soldiers. Othello had many friends in the Venetian army. His best friend was a man named Michael Cassio. This Cassio was a young man from Florence. He was very charming, cheerful, and handsome, and women loved him. He was also wealthy and intelligent. All these qualities might have made Othello a little jealous of Cassio. Othello was older, and he had just married a young and beautiful wife. But Othello's soul was noble. He could not be jealous of Cassio. When Othello first met Desdemona, he asked Cassio's advice about her.
"Good Cassio, I have been a soldier all my life. I do not know the art of conversation. What will please a beautiful lady? What should I say to her?"
Cassio had advised Othello to talk to Desdemona of his life. Cassio also helped Othello to win Desdemona by praising Othello when he wasn't there. Of course, this plan was successful, so both Othello and Desdemona liked and trusted Cassio very much. Now that they were married, they still were friendly with Cassio. Othello was a serious man, and he liked Cassio's cheerful nature. Desdemona also enjoyed Cassio. He made her laugh. But, of course, she loved no one more than Othello. Othello had recently given Cassio a high position in the Venetian army. This action angered another soldier, a man named Iago. Iago was older than Cassio, and he thought he ought to get the position. Iago hated the handsome Cassio, and he hated Othello for liking Cassio. He was jealous of both of these men. Recently, Iago had decided that Othello was too interested in his wife, Emilia. This was not true, of course. Othello loved Desdemona only. But Iago was a very suspicious person. His dark, evil mind thought up a way to get revenge on them all. His plan would involve Othello, Desdemona, and Cassio. Iago was evil, but he was extremely wise. He had studied human nature for many years. He knew that the most painful feeling in the world, for a man, is the feeling of jealousy. The feeling that the woman you love loves and wants another man. The fires of hell are less than this pain.
If I can make the Moor jealous of Cassio, if I can make him think Desdemona loves Cassio, who knows what will happen? Perhaps the murder of Cassio or Othello or both. I don't care,
Iago said to himself one day. Now, the news that the Turkish army was caught in a storm made everyone quite happy. Everyone felt like it was a holiday. All the soldiers and their ladies drank and danced. Everyone celebrated the recent wedding of their noble general Othello to the lovely Desdemona. That first night on the island, Cassio was on duty. Othello told him to make sure the other soldiers didn't drink too much.
Make sure they don't get drunk and fight. We don't want to upset the good people of this island,
said Othello. Cassio promised to obey the orders, but Iago came over to talk to Cassio. He had some bottles of wine with him. He persuaded Cassio to drink a lot. Soon, Cassio was very drunk.
Let me drink to the lady Desdemona,
he cried.
She is a most beautiful lady.
He said these words many times and drank many glasses of wine. Soon, a gold gentleman named Roderigo passed by. Iago had earlier spoken with this man.
I'll pay you money to start a fight with Cassio tonight,
he said. The man agreed. So he insulted Cassio, and being drunk, Cassio jumped up and took out his sword. These two fought, and Montano, governor of Cyprus, who interfered to appease the dispute, was wounded. Meanwhile, Iago ran to tell everyone that soldiers were fighting.
Ring the alarm!
He cried loudly. He wanted Othello to hear what was happening. Othello did hear and jumped out of bed. He went to the scene of the fight. He asked Cassio what had happened. Cassio was not so drunk now. He was terribly sorry to have disobeyed Othello's orders. Cassio was too much ashamed to reply, so Iago spoke. Iago pretended to be very sorry for Cassio.
I don't want to make trouble for him, but he was very drunk,
said Iago. Of course, Iago didn't tell Othello that he had made Cassio drunk, and Cassio didn't remember. While Iago spoke, he seemed to make Cassio's actions seem very serious. Othello was forced to take Cassio's new position away from him. The next morning, when Cassio woke up, he felt awful. He went to talk to Iago about the problem.
I feel terrible, Iago. I was a fool last night. There is no hope that Othello will give me the position back. I must tell him I am a drunk. What can I do, Iago?
Iago was very pleased. Everything was working perfectly.
Good Cassio, do not speak to Othello about this problem. If you want your position back, you must speak to the lovely Desdemona, his wife. She can do anything with Othello. He loves her so. Desdemona likes you. She is honest and good. She will agree to persuade Othello to give you the position back.
Cassio followed this evil advice. He spoke to Desdemona, who kindly agreed to speak to her husband. Good Cassio, I will not stop until you have your position returned to you, she said. Look, here comes Othello and Iago. Leave me now. I will go and speak to Othello. Desdemona kept her promise. For the next few hours she talked about Cassio. She praised him constantly. Othello could not send her away. Will you forgive him tonight? Desdemona asked.
Not tonight, Desdemona. It is too soon for that. I am very angry with him,
Othello said. Then what about tomorrow, dear lord? Desdemona said. Look how unhappy Cassio is. I do not think his crime was so terrible. Any man can become drunk by accident. Othello still was not sure. Dear Othello, I am surprised at you, said Desdemona seriously. Cassio has done so much for you and for us. He helped you to win my love. If I am angry with you, he praises you constantly. I ask you to do this small thing for me. Be friends with Cassio once again." Othello could not say no to his wife. He promised Desdemona to give Cassio his old position back. It had happened that, when Cassio had spoken to Desdemona, Othello and Iago entered the same room. Immediately, Cassio left the room. Iago looked serious.
"I don't like that,"
he said to Othello. Othello didn't pay attention to Iago's comment, but after his long conversation with Desdemona, he remembered Iago's words. When Desdemona had gone, Iago came walking by.
"Oh, good afternoon, General Othello. You know, I was curious about something. When you were courting Desdemona, did Cassio know of your love for her?" "Of course he did,"
said Othello.
"Cassio carried messages from me to Desdemona. He spoke highly of me to Desdemona. He helped me a lot."
Iago looked very upset.
"Is that right? Are you serious?"
he cried. Othello remembered Iago's earlier comment about Desdemona and Cassio.
"I don't like that,"
he had said. Suddenly, Desdemona and Cassio happened to pass them. They were talking in whispers. Othello began to feel worried. Was there some meaning in all this? Unfortunately, he trusted Iago as a friend. Now Iago seemed to be keeping some terrible secret from him.
"Iago, I want you to tell me what you are thinking,"
said Othello firmly.
"There is something bothering you about my wife and Cassio. What is it?" "Well, what if some terrible idea is in my mind?"
said the sly Iago.
"It doesn't matter. I am a very ridiculous person, Othello. I would feel terrible if my stupid ideas caused you any trouble. People's good names shouldn't be destroyed because of my little thoughts."
Iago went on speaking in this evil way. Othello became more and more curious. Finally, Iago said,
"No, good Othello, do not be worried. You must beware of jealousy. It is a terrible thing."
Othello didn't know what to think. Iago seemed to be telling him that he had a reason to be jealous. He began to feel suspicious.
"Iago, I know that my wife is beautiful. She sings and dances well and enjoys company. She speaks her thoughts. But most important, she is loyal to me. I must have proof before I accuse her,"
he said.
"Oh, dear General, I certainly have no proof,"
cried Iago.
"I am sure your lady is honest. I only beg you, watch her carefully when Cassio is near. If she praises him too much, well, do not be jealous. But do not be too sure. For I, Iago, understand Italian women more than you. In Venice, wives let heaven and God see many things that they would not show their husbands. You know, Desdemona did lie to her father when she married you. She kept it a secret from him. I will only say, women can have many secrets."
Othello thought, she lied to her father. Would she also lie to me? He looked so upset that Iago then apologized to him. Othello pretended not to care, but in his mind he was afraid.
"Iago, I beg you to continue speaking. What else do you know?" "Well, I don't want to accuse my good friend Cassio,"
said Iago sadly. Inside, he was laughing.
"I don't really know anything."
Iago then said,
"My lord Othello, let me say this. I am your friend. I want you to be happy. Desdemona refused many men from her own class and race. She chose you instead. This is very amazing. She is a rich lady of Venice. Perhaps Desdemona has a strange nature. Perhaps one day she may wake up and decide, what was I thinking? She may compare you to the fine young Italian men around her, men with handsome white faces, men like herself. What will you do then?
Iago advised Othello not to speak to Cassio immediately.
Just listen to her and watch her. If she praises Cassio too much, well, maybe she loves him.
Iago had a great deal of cunning. He would use Desdemona's goodness and her friendship with Cassio to destroy her, and through her, Cassio and Othello. From that moment on, Othello could not rest. He promised Iago to be patient, but his thoughts were like a storm. He could never be sure of Desdemona's love again. What if Iago was telling the truth? What if Desdemona and Cassio were having an affair? Perhaps they were laughing at him because he was a black Moor. Othello couldn't concentrate in the next days. He did not feel like a man. Sometimes he thought Desdemona was honest, and sometimes not. Sometimes he believed Iago, sometimes he didn't. He was a man in torture. He wanted to die. He wished Iago had never said anything. One day, Iago said,
My lord, does Desdemona have a little handkerchief? It is red and white. Yes,
said Othello.
It was my first gift to her.
Iago looked sad.
Well, I just saw it in Cassio's hand. He rubbed his face with it.
Othello was furious.
If this is true, Iago, I will not rest until revenge is done. I will kill Cassio within 3 days. And as for that beautiful liar, she must die too.
To a jealous man, small things may seem like serious proof. Othello never once asked how Cassio might have gotten Desdemona's handkerchief. The truth was that Desdemona had never given it to Cassio. She would never give presents to another man. Both Cassio and Desdemona were totally innocent. But Iago, how evil he was. Iago had made his wife, Emilia, steal this handkerchief from Desdemona. Emilia was a good but weak woman. She found it by fortune and gave it to Iago. Then Iago put this napkin in Cassio's lodging. Othello went to Desdemona.
My head aches,
he said.
Would you give me your handkerchief? I want to rub my head with it.
I am sorry, my dear lord. I think I have lost that handkerchief, said Desdemona sadly.
How?
Said Othello angrily.
That handkerchief was magical. It came from a witch in Egypt. When my mother gave it to me, she said, This handkerchief will make your wife love you while she keeps it. But if she loses it, you will love her no more. I have had your father's love because of it. Make sure your wife keeps it forever.
Is this true? Cried Desdemona. She was very frightened. She didn't want to lose Othello's love.
Yes,
said Othello. Of course, none of it was true. He wanted to see how his wife would react. Desdemona was upset and afraid, but she tried to be cheerful. She promised to find the handkerchief. Then she asked Othello, What about good Michael Cassio? Have you become friends with him again? He is a wonderful man, you know. This was just what Iago had foretold. Othello was furious. He had to leave the room. He was so angry. It was true. Desdemona was not honest. Meanwhile, Desdemona was very worried. Could it be that my lord is jealous? She said to herself. I do not want to believe it. He is too honorable. But why is he acting so strangely? It must be true. No, I cannot accuse him. What is wrong with me? Perhaps some bad news from Venice troubles him and makes him angry with me. Men are not perfect. They cannot always be sweet and kind to their wives. She scolded herself for thinking that Othello was jealous. When this couple met later, Othello said what he thought.
You love another man,
he said coldly.
You have been unfaithful to me.
And this poor man could not stand the pain and cried. Dear Othello, "Why are you crying?" cried Desdemona.
"I can stand anything but your infidelity. Pain and war and sickness, but not this. It has broken my heart. You look so beautiful now. I wish you had never been born,"
cried Othello, and left her. The gentle and innocent Desdemona also wept many tears. She did not understand why Othello was suspicious of her. How could it have happened? She loved Othello so much. It killed her to see him in pain. Desdemona was so upset that she felt ill. She went to her bed and fell asleep. Desdemona woke up later that night. Othello was kissing her. At first she was happy, but then she looked at Othello's face. He looked like a crazy man.
"Prepare to die,"
he said. Desdemona cried, "Oh, my husband, I beg you, tell me what I have done wrong. I love you so much."
"Silence! It is you and Cassio. You gave him that handkerchief. You are in love with him. You dishonor me."
Desdemona tried to defend herself, but Othello would not listen. He placed many sheets and blankets over Desdemona's body, and as she cried, he choked her to death. Only 2 minutes after this horrible event, Cassio was brought into the room. He was wounded and bleeding. Iago had paid Roderigo to murder him, but Roderigo had failed to do so. Iago had then killed Roderigo to prevent his plan being discovered. And at the same time, Iago wounded Cassio from behind. Unfortunately for Iago, some letters were found in Roderigo's pocket and given to Cassio. Iago had written these letters, explaining his evil plan from the beginning. They showed Iago's guilt and the innocence of Desdemona and Cassio.
"My good General Othello, what have I done to you? Why has Iago tried to murder me?"
Cassio cried. When Othello read these letters, he realized what Iago had done. But now Othello was a murderer. He had killed his dear lady, who had always loved him. The incredible pain of this discovery was too much.
"My darling, I have wronged you. I will pay the price with my own life,"
said Othello, and killed himself. His body fell next to his dead lady's. The people of Cyprus were amazed at all these terrible things. They had thought very highly of Othello.
"He was a brave soldier and a good husband,"
they said.
"but an evil man destroyed him. He did not love wisely. He loved too much. When he learned his mistake, he did the honorable thing and died."
Now that Othello was dead, all his brave and good deeds were remembered. The evil Iago was tortured and killed for his crimes, and Cassio got the power and command in Cyprus.
Macbeth. Many years ago in Scotland there lived a king named Duncan the Meek. His close relative was a man named Macbeth. Macbeth was a great lord and soldier, and he was very famous for his brave deeds. Recently, Macbeth had helped to defeat an army from Norway. One cold evening, Macbeth and another general, Banquo, were returning from this great battle. They were walking over a large, dark field. Suddenly, they saw 3 strange old women standing in front of them. The women were dressed in black rags. They were incredibly old, but the strangest thing about them was they had long, white beards.
"Greetings, Macbeth, Lord of Glamis,"
said one of the women. Macbeth did not understand. The general was not a little startled to find himself known by such creatures. Then another witch spoke.
"Greetings, Macbeth, Lord of Cawdor."
Macbeth was not the Lord of Cawdor. He did not know why these women were honoring him with the name. Finally, the third old woman spoke.
"All bow before Macbeth. He will be King of Scotland."
Macbeth was not the king. Were these old women ill or crazy? Macbeth could never be king, unless King Duncan's sons died. Then the strange women spoke to Banquo.
You are less than Macbeth, but you are much greater,
they cried.
You are not as happy as he, but you are much happier.
And one witch said,
You will never be king, yet your son will be king of Scotland after you are gone.
Neither Macbeth nor Banquo understood the women's strange words, but suddenly the women disappeared. Then the two men realized that they must be witches. Macbeth and Banquo stood talking about what they had seen. Suddenly they were interrupted by some messengers from King Duncan. Lord Macbeth, we are pleased to tell you that you are now the Lord of Cawdor, they said. Macbeth was amazed. It seemed that the witches were telling the future. He did not know what to say. He thought, I wonder if the rest of the witches' words will come true. Could I be king of Scotland one day? This idea pleased him. To Banquo he said, Don't you want your sons to become kings after me? How wonderful it would be if the witches' words came true. Banquo was more careful and cautious than his friend. He said, You might want to be king, Macbeth, but be careful. Often these witches do not tell the whole truth. Their wisdom is hard for mortal men to understand. Often witches' stories lead men into great danger. But Macbeth did not pay attention to his friend. He and Banquo continued their journey home. From that time on, Macbeth could not think of anything else except how to become king of Scotland. Macbeth had a wife called Lady Macbeth. She was a very terrible, evil woman. All she wanted was power. She did not care what she had to do to get it. When Macbeth told her the story of the witches, Lady Macbeth was delighted.
You and I will become the king and queen of Scotland. We will kill King Duncan and his sons too, if necessary. This is meant to be. It is our destiny.
Macbeth was not so sure. He loved the idea of being king, but he did not want to murder anyone. But Lady Macbeth kept talking about it.
I say again, this is meant to be. The witches want you to murder King Duncan. If you do not, then our destiny will not come true.
At this time it happened that King Duncan came to visit Macbeth and his wife. He arrived with his two sons, Malcolm and Donalbain. With them were many other lords and ladies. King Duncan wanted to honor Macbeth for his bravery in the recent battles. King Duncan was very pleased with Macbeth's castle, which was quite beautiful. Lady Macbeth made sure to take good care of the king. She seemed to be sweet and beautiful, but inside she was hard and evil. During their evening meal, the king gave Lady Macbeth a large diamond. He was very pleased with both Macbeth and his wife. After the evening meal, King Duncan grew tired and went to sleep. Two of his servants slept in his bedroom with him. Lady Macbeth had made sure to give the king's servants a lot of wine, so they would sleep deeply. Some hours passed. Everyone went to sleep, or almost everyone. Now it was the time of night when the whole world seems dark and dead. It was the time when evil dreams disturb men's sleep. The only things awake were the wolf and the murderer. In her bedroom, Lady Macbeth was awake. She was thinking about how to kill King Duncan. Normally, she would not have killed anyone because she was a woman. She had been able to persuade Macbeth to kill the king. But now she was afraid that her husband Macbeth would lose his courage and fail to do it.
Macbeth is too kind to murder anyone,
she thought. He wanted to be king of Scotland, yet he was too weak to grab the power for himself. So Lady Macbeth would have to grab it for him. She found a large, sharp knife. Quietly, she walked into the king's bedroom. The king's servants did not wake up. Lady Macbeth stood at the king's bed looking at him. He was sleeping deeply. Lady Macbeth thought to herself.
There is something about him that reminds me of my own father. No, I cannot kill him. Macbeth must do it.
She went to talk to Macbeth. Meanwhile, Macbeth had been thinking about his task. I could never murder the king. One reason is I am the king's close relative. He is a guest in my house. I am supposed to protect him from anyone who would harm him. And I was going to kill him myself. Macbeth also had a great respect for the king. He is a good and wise ruler. He loves his people. Kings such as this are loved in heaven. If he dies, heaven will revenge his death. Besides, Macbeth had gained power from his friendship with the king. If Duncan was killed, what would happen to me? When Lady Macbeth found her husband, he had decided not to kill King Duncan. But Lady Macbeth was not a woman who gave up easily. When she wanted something, she got it. She was also very intelligent, and she knew Macbeth very well. She spoke to him for a long time. She gave many reasons why he should kill the king.
It will be over so quickly. It will only take a few minutes, and then we will be the rulers of Scotland.
Then she pretended to be angry.
You are a liar. You promised to do this thing. I never break my promises. If I had a baby, it would not matter how small and sweet the child was. I would throw it on the floor and kill it, if I had sworn to do so. We will blame the king's servants. You can put the knife in their hands. It will be so easy,
she said. Macbeth began to agree with his wife. He gathered up the courage to kill the king. He took the knife in his hand and walked to the king's room. But as he went, he saw another knife floating in the air in front of him. Blood dripped from it. He tried to grab it, but it vanished. It's only my mind. It's not real. I am only tired and worried from this terrible business, Macbeth told himself. Macbeth pushed his fears away and walked into King Duncan's room. He killed the king in 1 second. Just after he'd killed the king, the servants began to talk in their sleep. Macbeth hid in the shadows. One servant began to laugh, but the other cried out, "Murder! God help us!" Macbeth killed the servants too. He quietly left the room. As he returned to his own room, he thought he heard a strange voice.
We will sleep no more. Macbeth has killed sleep. Glamis has killed sleep. So Cotter will sleep no more. Macbeth will never sleep again.
Macbeth did not understand the meaning of these words, but he was very afraid. Lady Macbeth was waiting impatiently for Macbeth. She was relieved to see that he had kept his promise and killed the king. She took the bloody knife and quietly returned to the dead king's room. She put some blood from the knife on the servants' faces. Then she placed the knife in one of their hands and left the room. The next morning the king was found to be dead. Macbeth and his wife pretended to be terribly sad. They told everyone that the servants had definitely killed the king. The proof seemed very strong. However, most people did not believe their story. Macbeth had much more reason to kill the king. Why would those 2 silly servants do it? King Duncan's 2 sons ran away, afraid for their lives. Malcolm, the oldest son, went to England, while Donalbain went to Ireland. So, with King Duncan's sons gone, Macbeth became King of Scotland. So the 3 witches' words had come true. Macbeth and his wife were the most powerful people in Scotland, yet they still thought about the witches' words. Macbeth was king, but his sons would not rule after him. Banquo was not king, yet Banquo's son would rule. This was very troublesome to Macbeth. He and Lady Macbeth, who was now queen, decided to make sure the witch's story wouldn't come true. They would kill both Banquo and his son. One night the new king and queen had a great feast, and asked many lords and ladies to attend. Banquo and his son Fleance were also invited. The road to the king's palace was filled with criminals. Macbeth hired some of these criminals to kill Banquo and his son. The criminals killed Banquo, but Fleance was able to escape. During the feast, the queen was very charming. Everyone admired her beauty and manners. Macbeth talked with his lords. Everyone in Scotland who is good and honorable is here with me, the king. I only wish my good friend Banquo were here also. Perhaps he has forgotten me. I hope nothing has happened to him. Just then, to Macbeth's horror, the ghost of Banquo appeared. The ghost walked over and sat down in the chair which Macbeth was about to sit, staring at him. Macbeth was a brave man, but the sight of the horrible-looking ghost made his face turn white. He could not speak, he was so afraid. Of course, no one else in the room saw anything of the ghost. They watched Macbeth gazing upon an empty chair, trying to talk to the air, asking it questions, took it for a fit of wildness of his mind. Finally, the queen ran over and grabbed her husband.
"Be quiet,"
she whispered angrily.
"You are only seeing things. You saw a knife in the air once when you killed the king. Stop talking, or everyone will find out what we did."
Then the queen spoke to the guests.
"I am sorry, my lords and ladies. Your king is ill. It is not serious, but you must leave now."
Everyone soon left, wondering what was going on. Since Macbeth and his wife had become king and queen, they both saw and heard awful things. They had terrible dreams. Their biggest fear was that Fleance, Banquo's son, would return. They wanted to kill him, but they did not know where he was. They still had no children. If Fleance returned, he might kill them and become king of Scotland. They were always unhappy and afraid. One day, Macbeth decided to go and talk to the witches. They had told the future. Now, Macbeth wanted to know what would happen next. Macbeth searched for the witches' home. Finally, he found them living in a dark cave. The witches could see the future, so of course they knew he was coming. When Macbeth arrived, the witches were preparing awful potions in a large pot. They used these potions to discover the future. The potion had many strange and interesting ingredients. Dog's tongues, dragon's skin, and the finger of a dead child were only some. The witches boiled this potion in a large pot. When it became too hot, they poured the blood of a monkey on it. Then they added the blood of a pig that had eaten her babies. They used all these horrible things to make spirits appear. These spirits would then answer their questions about the future. Macbeth asked the witches for their help in learning his future.
"Do you want us to show you the spirits of the air?"
they asked him. Macbeth was not afraid of the spirits, whatever they were. "Where are they? Let me see them," he said. Then the witches called the spirits. There were 3 of them. The first spirit appeared. It looked like a large, ugly head with no body.
"King Macbeth,"
it said,
"you must watch out for Macduff, the Lord of Fife."
Macbeth thanked the spirit. The Lord of Fife was a man named Macduff. Macbeth disliked Macduff because he was powerful. Then the second spirit came. It looked like a child with blood running down its body.
"King Macbeth, do not fear,"
it cried.
"You may laugh at all men. No man who is born from a woman's body can hurt you. Be strong, firm, and cruel."
"Then I will let you live, Macduff," cried Macbeth. "Why should I be afraid of you? But no, I must be certain that you can't hurt me, so I will kill you anyway to stop my fears." Then the third spirit appeared. It also looked like a child, but with a crown. In one hand the spirit held a small tree.
"King Macbeth, do not be afraid of anything. You will never be beaten until the trees in the woods stand up and fight you."
"This is wonderful news," cried Macbeth. "For who can make the trees move? So I will live a normal life and not be killed. But spirits, I must know one more thing. Tell me if you can. Will Banquo's son ever rule this country?" Then Macbeth heard music in the air. Then 8 men, who looked like ghosts, passed him. The last man was Banquo. Banquo, who was covered in blood, had a mirror in his hand. In this mirror, Macbeth saw the image of many more men, all walking. Banquo smiled horribly and pointed to the mirror. Then Macbeth understood that Banquo's son and his descendants would someday rule in Scotland. It didn't matter what Macbeth did. The witches made the spirits disappear. They bowed to Macbeth and disappeared. From this time on, all Macbeth's thoughts were dark and terrible. When Macbeth left the witches, he heard that Macduff had run away to England. Macbeth was frightened to learn that a great army was growing there. It was led by Malcolm, one of dead King Duncan's sons. The English army was planning to attack Scotland for the purpose of destroying Macbeth. Malcolm wanted to be king of Scotland. Macbeth was terribly angry. He went to Macduff's castle and killed Macduff's wife and children. He also killed anyone he knew to be friends with Macduff. These horrible acts made Macbeth's people hate and fear him. Most people ran away to England to join Malcolm and Macduff. The English army was strong and large, and it was quite close to Scotland now. Everyone wanted to see Macbeth dead and gone. All believed he was an evil king. Macbeth often thought of King Duncan, whom he had killed. He felt very jealous of the dead king, whom everyone had loved and honored. During this dark time, Macbeth's wife, the queen, went crazy. The knowledge that everyone hated her and Macbeth was hard for her. She felt guilty for the things she'd done. She often saw and heard things that weren't there. One night she woke up to find blood on her hands. She tried to remove it, but it would not disappear.
"Out, damn spot! Out, I say!"
she screamed. A few minutes after this, the evil queen killed herself. So Macbeth had no friend to talk to, and no one to help him make plans. He wished to die, but he was afraid to. But when he learned that Malcolm's army was coming, he found some of his old courage. "I will die fighting," he said. But also Macbeth remembered the words of the witch's third spirit. "No one can hurt me, they said so," said Macbeth. "I will be king of Scotland until the trees stand up and fight against me." Macbeth locked himself up in the palace. It was a very strong, tall building. He would be protected for many days. He angrily waited for Malcolm's army to come. He did nothing but wait and wonder and be afraid. One dark day a servant came to Macbeth. The servant was pale and shaking with fear. "King Macbeth, the forest is moving. I saw the trees moving. They are coming this way." "Liar!" screamed Macbeth. "If you are lying, I'll hang you from a tree until hunger kills you. If you're telling the truth—" Macbeth stopped shouting. He began to doubt the third spirit's words. He didn't need to be afraid unless the forest moved, they had said. And now the forest was moving. All his plans seemed to be ruined. "If you are telling the truth, then let us find our swords," said Macbeth. "There's no reason to stay here. I am tired of living. I wish to die in battle." Macbeth ran outside his bedroom and the gate of his castle. He looked around at the ground. He saw a strange and frightening sight. The spirit's strange words can easily be explained. When the English army came near to Macbeth's castle, Malcolm had an idea. He told all the soldiers to cut the branches off many trees. Then they would use the branches to hide behind. In this way, Macbeth would not know how many soldiers there were. It would frighten and confuse him. Macbeth's servant had seen this strange sight. So the spirit's words had come true in a strange way. Then a great battle began. Macbeth's army was extremely small. There were not many people who were still his friends. Still, Macbeth was a great warrior, and he fought bravely. He killed many English soldiers before seeing Macduff. He remembered the first spirit's words.
Watch out for Macduff, the Lord of Fife.
He was afraid and tried to run away, but Macduff saw Macbeth before he could escape. "Horrible, evil murderer! You killed my family!" shouted Macduff. "Now you will fight me, and then go to hell!" Macbeth did not want to fight Macduff, because he had already killed his whole family. But then he remembered the spirit's words, that no man who was born from a woman could hurt him. He gave an evil smile. "You're wasting your time, Macduff," said Macbeth. "You can't harm me. No man can. I have a magical life. No ordinary man who is born from a woman can harm me." "Fool! Your witches and spirits lied to you," said Macduff, smiling coldly. "Or they did not tell you the whole truth. I was not born from a woman, not like other men. I was cut out of my mother's stomach." Macbeth was more afraid than ever. He now understood the mysterious wisdom of the witches. They had told him the truth, but it had a very different meaning than what he thought. "Men should never trust witches," he cried. "They say one thing but mean something very different. Oh, horrible life! I will not fight with you, Macduff." "Then live," laughed Macduff. "All the people of Scotland will hate you and laugh at you. You will be a prisoner, and we will put a sign around your neck that says, 'Murderer, thief, he stole King Duncan's crown.'" "Never!" screamed Macbeth. "I will not live to see Malcolm become the King of Scotland. I will not live to be laughed at. Even if the forest walks, I will fight to the death." And he attacked Macduff. For a long time it seemed that Macbeth would win the fight. But suddenly Macduff cut off the king's head. He gave it to Malcolm. Everyone was delighted to see that Macbeth was dead. That day Malcolm, the dead King Duncan's son, became the good and right King of Scotland. Happily, the witch's words to good Banquo did come true. Banquo's son Fleance had escaped from Macbeth. Fleance's descendants were all good and wise kings. These kings ruled in Scotland, and that family ended with King James I of England. Under King James, the countries of England and Scotland were united.